Brandy, I can always tell your car. With the sticker it says Timber Creek, it's still intense, INTENTS. I think that's hilarious. Every time I look at it.
Hi, Michelle.
Great. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District. Today is Saturday, November 8th, and the time is 8 a.m. Michael, do you have some announcements?
Welcome to the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District regular board meeting. This board meeting is being fed live over the internet. The public would like to view this meeting by going to KMPUD.com and following the appropriate link. If the public would like to make a comment or pose a question, please email msharp@kmpud.com and the board will respond. We'd like to acknowledge Michelle Gamble, our project manager, is with us here today, and Dave Wrightley, our electrical engineer, is on the phone.
Welcome, Dave. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you for joining us. Excuse me. Peter, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Rickard, absent. Andy? Here. O'Grady?
Here.
Dormer here, and Epstein.
Epstein here. Item 4 is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on non-agenda items relating to district business. No action can be taken by the board on matters not appearing on the agenda. Okay, Nancy? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. It looks likely that Amador County is going to have a new District 3 supervisor, Lynn Morgan. And with that, I would encourage the district, all of you as board members, to reach out to her. I feel like it's a new day for Kirkwood. I think there's going to be active representation, so anytime that you've had pushback from the county, to be it's start all over and let's try again.
Peter?
I would like just to make a couple comments, but the first is to acknowledge and thank Michael, Rick, and the entire staff at the PUD for their professionalism and their assistance and their persistence in helping us in the last month or so, what was some challenges with a number of contractors and subcontractors and following the rules and inspections and stuff like that. And especially Michael and Rick, really worked closely with me, to help us overcome what were some deficiencies in some of that process. And so I just want to acknowledge that, that professionalism and that support and the help, and thank, the staff at the PUD for, what they've done to help us get to this point. I'll also just give you a quick update. As you drove in, you saw 4 of the modules there. There's a total of 10 that make up the duplex. The other 6 are arriving next week on Wednesday. We're working on those this morning to do some roof raising and some other things, so we're ready. The foundations are poured and curing, and next Thursday is when we intend to set those units, and probably by the end of Friday, you will go from nothing but a foundation to what looks like a 95% completed building. And it's a pretty interesting process. So if anybody, I'm going to be taking some photos of it, but if any of you want to kind of watch this, it's really interesting. And I think for our company, and I think for a lot of mountain resorts, this is going to be a way to build in the mountains with our short building seasons, with our limited resources of construction workers and time and that sort of thing. So it's a very interesting system, but again, at the end of the day, I want to thank the PUD for helping us get through approvals and a lot of other things. So I thank you, Michael, and I thank the rest of the board.
Great, that's nice to hear. Thank you. Anybody else? So moving on to agenda item 5, this is consents to the agenda or consent calendar. For purposes of the Brown Act, all consent action items listed, please give a brief description of each item. So there are 4 items on the consent agenda: minutes, employee housing, lease revision, consent for claims, receivable shut-off. Would anybody like to pull one?
Yeah, I'd like to pull the employee housing lease revision and defer on that item.
Any others? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll move we adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So there are no consent items brought forward for separate discussion. Moving on to new and unfinished business, big section 8, starting with 8A, which is discussion and possible action regarding the timeline and construction activities associated with the Out Valley Power Line project. Manager Sharp and Michelle Gamble. Welcome, Michelle.
The Out Valley project will come in 9 parts today. We'll be discussing the overall construction update and remaining risks. We'll talk about the project closeout. We'll talk about change orders that are up for approval. We'll talk about the overall project costs and remaining risks, the B8 loan drawdown, the powerhouse depreciation study, the revision of the PG&E interconnection agreement, the Out Valley operations and maintenance, and lastly, the PG&E transmission interconnection handbook.
Is that all?
Well, I ran out of room on the page, so.
And daylight.
Oh, wait, we have another page. So with that, I'll start off with the Out Valley construction. The last 6 weeks have been very challenging for the district. They say that the halfway point in the marathon, in a 26.2 mile marathon, is about 20 miles in. Such is true for the Out Valley project. I think the last 10% takes about 50% of the effort. Following the description is some of these challenges. As has been reported, the T1 line is a communications line between KM Green and Stockton required by PG&E. Since this line has nothing to do with the district, it was requested that PG&E place the order and pay for this line. However, both items were refused, so we actually had to place the order for this line. This line is needed for PG&E to complete end-to-end testing on the three-way protection scheme on the overhead line. The line was actually in, but due to a communication error, AT&T actually placed it in a wrong channel, disabling the line. So the district had to wait and get it moved to the right channel, as has been reported. This order was originally placed in April 2014. PG&E was waiting for this move to happen so they can complete the end-to-end testing, and got frustrated to a point where they were threatening to de-energize the 115 line, which would set us back considerably on our. So EEC staff and district staff worked on various communication options, including a satellite phone with an antenna to try to get communications from KM Green to the district. Finally, we were able to strap 2 speakerphones together, put it in a box, and put a blanket over it like a pair of kittens. And that actually created the communication needed so that PG&E could actually finish their end-to-end testing. The PG&E testing was completed and the T-line was finally installed shortly thereafter. It should be noted that the need for this line will go away with the installation of the Salt Springs.
It'll go away if we build the switching station, is that?
Right.
Okay.
When we initially test energized the 34K line, we found that the cables connecting the transformer and the vault with the switchgear had been reversed. This began a considerable effort by EEC, by Wilson, and by district staff to actually have to move these conduits into the correct location. We had to uncover the lines in the dirt room, pull out the cable, redo the conduit, re-pull the cable, make the terminations, and then test the lines to make sure they all were working. And here are some pictures that show the effort. This is our crews in there. That's in the dirt room right next to the switchgear. And that is probably 10 feet down as we're actually uncovering the conduit. Here's the conduit being excavated. Here's a good shot of actually the conduit being rerouted to the other side to actually get there. This was a tremendous effort because all of these parts are specially made, and we had trucks going to Sparks and Rancho Cordova and everywhere to get the termination parts. But finally, we had to cut the cable out, and pull out the cable, and then put in new cable and put in new combinations because you just don't splice this stuff. And of course, the cable that was existing was too short to go to the existing runs. With the conduit rerun, we were able to energize the 34K line on October 25th. On October 26th, we actually took a power outage to check the synchronization and rotation and found that the rotation was wrong. This caused havoc at the powerhouse, but we were able to correct the problems and move towards valley energization. One of the requirements of the interconnection agreement was for PG&E. With PG&E is for a long-term SUP to be signed, a special use permit to be signed with the United States Forest Service. Due to the King Fire and some other issues, this had been delayed at the Forest Service. Now, days before the energization, the supervisor was on a hunting trip and could not be reached. Due to efforts by the Forest Service, the supervisor was reached on October 30th, 2 days before energization. And we actually received this, which is the signed SUP. So we got through the T1 line, we got through the conduit, we got through the energization, test energization, we got through the Forest Service, and with these issues behind us, we were able to successfully energize the valley on time on November 1st at 10:06 a.m. So thanks to all and congratulations to all.
Well, congratulations and thank you, Michael. Dave, and everybody who contributed.
So on Thursday, during our weekly Out Valley conference call, and this is a true story. I'm talking on the phone with Dave Rightly and Michelle, and Dave Rightly asks if the lights are still on. It's kind of a banter that we do, and I say, yes, amazingly, your design's still working. And minutes later, this happens. So we rushed to see what happened. Yeah, it actually did. It happened just about that. We have a power outage. A problem at the PG&E Salt Spring substation caused our 34K breakers to trip and necessitated the district to go on backup generators. Further complicating the issue was a problem with the residential feed breaker. At Kirkwood, you never only have one problem. It's always multiple. It's always the district staff with EEC's help was able to restore Valley Power, and then after checking for possible faults, restore the Out Valley line and the residential feed. Dave Rightly has already given us corrections to the breakers that were needed. The 34K was too sensitive, and we had some incorrect breaker settings on our residential feed breaker. And I think staff responded extremely well on this, and it was a great learning experience. Communications with PG&E were established, we had a list of numbers, but we'd never actually called them. We actually called them, and somebody on the other end actually answered and provided us with real valuable information. So that connection was made. Communications with Dave Rightly and EEC were established, and that was really a huge help. We restored power. We were able to check on faults. We'd always heard about this is what you do in case of a fault, but we'd actually never done it in an emergency situation. So how fast do you get to drive on 88? Things like that. Checking for faults, switching back to the out-valley power once we had found that there were no faults on our line. All activities that we had trained for but had never done real time. And so I think it was a valuable learning experience, and I'm very thankful that it happened on November 6th and not on January 6th. So if there's any questions on that aspect of the construction?
The work that you described in the dirt room, digging up the conductors and changing them, how much did that cost? Who paid for it? It doesn't look like you want change orders.
Yeah, I have not gotten the bills from Wilson on that yet, so as soon as I have those bills and see what those costs are, I'd be happy to bring it to you. I'll be bringing it back to the board.
And I guess, this is nothing except expressing a little bit of paranoia, but given that we had a problem with PG&E right off the starting blocks, and when we were down there yesterday, it appeared they were having another problem, I guess you would kind of jump to the conclusion that maybe that's not such a well-oiled machine down there, and it might have a pattern of problems. That certainly be something we'll be watching for and keeping records on, I would assume.
I think the problem that they had a couple days ago and the problems we saw yesterday are the same problem. They had a major issue down in Salt Springs. But we did research before we even hooked into the 115, and it's a pretty reliable line. They've had a couple, they had a problem about 2 years ago in December. But besides that, they have the same 99.9% reliability
So
ratio.
we're able to see the records and assess that. Cool.
Before we spent $38 million.
When the breakers tripped and shut the power off, were they able to reset automatically, or require someone to go down there and reset those breakers?
Well, since we didn't know exactly why they had reset, I made a decision, since we did have the powerhouse and we were able to, that we wanted to check for faults along the way as a safety precaution. We had heard that there was a problem, but at the time we didn't know exactly what the problem was. And we thought it might be associated with our problem at the first, but while the information came in that it was actually on their side of the breaker, it had nothing to do with the district, and we had checked the line and visually looked at the overhead, and I made the decision that we should reclose the breaker, because you don't want to try to close the breaker on a direct fault.
Right.
So we did have
But you can do that automatically. You can do
we
that
can
by
do that from
computer
KMPUD.
or whatever.
Yes, we can.
Nancy?
So just a follow-up question to Bob's question. So are you anticipating that the district's going to have to pay for this, or we're not expecting a bill? It's not clear what we think is going to happen, because it certainly sounds like it's not our issue. But until you get a bill, you don't know. Is that what we're thinking?
I think that this is we don't have a bill yet.
Right.
And we need to establish responsibility for how the conduit switch actually happened, because it was not, that's not how it was supposed to be.
Right.
So it was partially it was a design issue, and we'll be working with EEC on it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great.
So I think it's,
Go ahead.
so I think it's important to note that on October 11, 2014, I came to the board and said, we've got problems with the T1 line, we've got problems with end-to-end testing, we've got problems with the energization, there's an IA revision, Cal ISO metering is in question. It's all resolved. So, very clear. So, now Michelle is going to go over the remaining construction activities and the project closing.
Well, good morning. Michael already talked about all of the complicated things that happened over the last month. I just wanted to give a real brief update on the final construction activities that have happened over about the last 6 weeks, and what you see out there now. So many of you have driven 88, and so Some of the cabinets you can see, some you can't see. I'll start out with, this is the first picture of Bear River Road, and as you're aware, we had numerous negotiations with Amador County regarding the condition of the road post-construction and what they wanted to see. I'm happy to say that we finally reached resolution with the county. We do have sign-off from the county, and so this is what the road looks like now. It's in great shape compared to how it was. It's very drivable. And the only reason you can even notice that we did anything is there is a kind of a color differentiation on the part of the road. So, yes, Michael?
Looks good.
It looks very good.
Saw it yesterday.
Better than when we started.
Yeah, it does, it does. There's, the bad parts of the road are on the other side of the road that we didn't impact, so. Up at KM Green, at the end of last construction season, we actually had our substation grading contractor. He had to put the site back and stabilize it for the winter, and he did that. We had both the overhead and the substation construction contractors in there this year. So we had staging up there. We had a lot of access. So post those activities, our substation contractor and our overhead contractor had to come in and restore seed and mulch and move slash back over these disturbed areas. So they've done that. Right now it looks like there's a lot of woody debris on the ground. What we saw last year post our stabilization was all these little trees and other plants coming up. Because we used all native material, we anticipate all of that to come back very robustly this year. So everything that was disturbed around the substation has now been stabilized. I've let the Forest Service know that we are satisfied with it, and I'm just awaiting final word from them that they're satisfied as well. So, next. Along 88, everything that we constructed on the underground this year where we were disturbing native soils or we were kind of blazing the trail, we had a couple areas where we blazed a trail along the old highway. We've gone back and we've also done seeding and mulching and using any slash that we generated as a part of the clearing and grubbing activities we've put back. So here was a site just of the hydromulch activities that were happening earlier in October. And this is what it looks like right now. So right now you could see what we've done. It was green initially, now it's kind of a brown mulch on there. You can see the rocks, you can see the branches. The areas that we did last year, there's some areas close to between like Peddler Hill and Foster Meadow Road. I think most people driving that area would never even know that we were in there last year and had essentially a road corridor constructed. We went back and the stabilization came through very well. So we're pleased with how this looked. Next. Now, $1 for anybody who can see the sectionalizing cabinet.
Oh, come on.
This is, as a part of the project, anything that we had adjacent to 88 in the view shed, we actually had to come back and screen our cabinets. Some of the cabinets are pretty close to the road, so we've used boulders. We weren't allowed to use logs in these areas. The Forest Service considers those a fire hazard, so they could burn down and the cabinet would be exposed. What we had to balance is we had to balance access to the cabinets versus screening. And so the cabinets are typically screened if you're driving along the road, coming from the side. When you get right next to the cabinet, you're gonna see it because we have to have access to it. But this is one I'm particularly happy with. This is just past that big granite face past the road to Places. And the cabinet's up there behind one of the boulders. It's a little bit set back from the road, but it really turned out nicely. Next. And then this one, here's another $1 to anybody who can see the substation. This is a photo that was taken from Spur 19, which is one of the areas of concern for visual from the Forest Service. We talked at length about this. As you're coming in from Spur 19, which is the shorter road to get to the substation, we sited the substation so that we'd have this swath of trees as screening. And so we've had a lot of construction activity up there, and you could always see the trash containers and the equipment. And I was up there about a week and a half ago, and there was very little equipment up there, so I snapped this picture. And so I'm really pleased. This is the view that most folks traveling along Spur 19 are going to see of the substation, or not see of the substation. And what's interesting, the one thing that catches your eye as you're driving along Spur 19 is PG&E had us put some orange balls on, marker balls on some of the overhead lines. And so as you're driving through, you see these little flashes of orange up in the sky, and that's what you see mostly of KM Green. Next. is the power line marker. Everywhere that we're along, essentially from Highway 88 all the way into Kirkwood, or all the way to Kirkwood, where we're off on the forest roads or we're in the Caltrans right-of-way adjacent to the highway but not in the highway, we were required to put up these little markers, they're little brown markers with a little red sticker on it that say power line. They're not on top of the power line because in most areas the power line is in the middle of a dirt road. But they're off adjacent, just as an additional warning for anybody who might be digging in that area that there is a power line in that area. So with that, that is what you're going to see out there as you're traveling on 88 or along the power line. That's the condition immediately post-construction of the power line. And now, since we've finished construction, now we have all of the project closeout work to complete. We have permit requirements. We had several environmental permits that we had to secure between the Army Corps of Engineers and Fish and Wildlife. They all have final reporting requirements, and we're in the process of sending all of those reporting requirements, final reports off to those agencies. We have information for Caltrans. We have to provide them with record drawings, and so we're in the process of getting the information from the contractor to be able to provide it to Exponential to complete those record drawings and then submit that to Caltrans to meet our permit requirements. We have a lot of contract construction paperwork that has to be completed. We have a reconciliation of quantities. When we bid the projects, we have an estimate of quantities. As we finish out the project, what we do is we reconcile, we do deducts and adds for, we said they were going to install 100 linear feet of this, and they ended up being 106 linear feet. So we have to reconcile all of that so that our quantities and our contracts amount balance out. We'll have any final change orders. We have some minor items that are coming through for the substation. We have some items for the underground that we'll talk about. We'll do our final pay requests. We'll get lien releases from the contractors for all of their subs and for themselves. We have to do certificates of completions. We have to record notice of completions on all the contract documents with the county. And then there is a period of time that we must wait to make sure that there are no claims against the contractor, and then we can release the retention. In addition to those contractual items, we have some final just project closeout items. I mentioned the as-built. We're still working with Volcano to do the reconciliation so we can get an invoice out to them for the work that we did on their behalf as a part of the project. We have a charge back to Thomas & Betts for the changes that we had to do on some of the structures based on errors that they had made. We have a charge back to Prismium for some cable issues that came up last year that we have not reconciled with them yet, so we're just going to maintain withholding of the money for the charges that we had. We have a charge back to Alstom for the CT replacement at KM Green. We're still working with PG&E. We're waiting for their punch list on the KM Green station service, the backup station service. We've installed that. They've gone out and they have a couple items that they want us to follow up on. So we're just waiting on their punch list so we can address that. We're working with the Forest Service on PG&E's behalf to come up with a project description and a map for that station service so that PG&E can amend their easement. So Michael had his list, and this is my closeout list of stuff, and I'm sure I've got a couple things checked off, but it's not complete. I'm sure we're meeting weekly on this. So like I said, most of it is just contractual paperwork that has to be done. And so with that, I'll let you show the next slide. I don't know why.
I think it's important to note that we'll be bringing back a lot of this project closeout at our next meeting on December 12th. But I'd like to thank Michelle and Joanne for their hard work and the efforts during this construction phase.
This was
When
taken
was
on
that?
October 31st, by the way.
Trick or treat.
We did win first place in the contest. We win as the Kirkwood project. So, this is the last time I send Michael anything.
Now you're famous.
Yes, yes. So with that, any questions on the final construction activities and the closeout items?
When do you think we'll be completely done?
With project closeout?
Yeah.
Our goal is to get all of the paper that we can up before the board for your December 12th meeting. The items that will remain outstanding will be waiting on any liens that we may need from the contractor before we can do the certificate or the notice of completion recordation. Everything else should be done by then.
Great. Any other questions from the board or the audience for Michelle or Michael on project completion? Cheryl?
I'd just like to say congratulations to Michelle and thank Michelle for her effort. Also Dave Wrightley, of course Michael and the staff and the board. Very pleased with the outcome of the project. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. So should we move on to maybe less good news, 8B, which is discussion and possible approval of change orders. Michelle will do this. There are 6 of them, and I think what we should do is have Michelle run through all 6, and then if we have questions at the end, we can come back. Otherwise, we'll be here all day.
Perfect. Well, what I'm presenting today, I hope doesn't seem as a surprise to the board. We have talked about, I believe, all of these items previously with the board, and what you're seeing before you today is the final paperwork on these items. Some of the items we knew were coming, and we were waiting for final dollar amounts. And we still have a couple items that we have not received some dollar amounts on, so this is not by any means a final change orders, list of change orders that the board will see. So what I'm going to start with is the first one, Wilson Construction. This is for the overhead. This one for $77,649. This is to correct the replacement on the 12 kV line. This was actually a PG&E design problem that they had when we actually constructed this. Our contractor noticed that there was a rotation of the lines, which was reducing the clearance between the 12 kV lines, and it had to be repaired. So this was a remedy that we came up with as a team. Wilson Construction actually did the repair. The district will be receiving a credit back from PG&E for this amount. So we have to run it through our contract, but the district will not be paying for this. So just to make sure everybody was aware of that one. The next 2 I'll talk about in concert with each other. They're both substation, KM Green substation change orders. These are for the additional rock drilling. You'll recall when we awarded the bid for the substation, the bids came in less than the amount of money that we had anticipated. And we had the discussion at that time, do we want to change the cost spreadsheet to reflect that, or do we want to keep that higher dollar amount there? And we had recommended, and the board concurred with keeping that higher dollar amount there because we knew we were going to hit rock. And when we bid the substation, what we got from the contractor was a price per foot if they ended up drilling in rock for the various foundations or for the ground rods. So we kept that dollar amount in there. When the contractor was up there, they actually did hit rock for the foundations. They actually hit a little bit more rock than we anticipated. But then on the ground rods, they came back and they came up with an easier way, so they negotiated a much lower price with us for the rock. It's still fairly significant when you look at these dollar amounts, but we did have a significant reserve on the substation to deal with those dollar amounts. So, and what we did is when they were excavating, we did have inspectors on site, so we verified all of these depths with the contractor. So since we were paying by the foot, we wanted to make sure that we were spot on as far as the depths that they encountered. Item number 4, I lumped together several items. These came in at the same time. This one ends up being a decrease of about $34,205. As we were moving forward with the project, we were looking at some of the change orders that we got from Wilson Substation, and we noticed the price of their bollards was extremely high. And after discussions with the district said, well, heck, we can install them for significantly less cost. So we have deducted that out of Wilson's cost and out of their scope of work. And then we had some other small items like, as they were putting up getting ready to put up the fence at a KM Green, we started having more discussions about snow creep on the fence. It's a 14-foot tall fence, it's a very large fence. And so we opted to have the contractor add a bottom rail to help prevent snow creep on the fence. We had some adjustments that we needed to the stairs at the KM Green Control Building. There was an insulator that needed to be added at the wave trap. There were some additional T-bodies in the vault here at KM Blue. And then we had some additional cable that we needed to add. So these all came together and we ended up having a deduct on the contract of about $34,000. I'm going to do 5 last. I'll do 6 first. I'll take those out of order. The construction ones done first. 6 is for the underground project. And this has a number of items, excuse me, included in it. The first one is we added a sectionalizing cabinet in a section of cable just west of Silver Lake Bridge, where we're crossing Forest Service and EID property. When we constructed it, we had actually 2 sections where we had 90-degree dog legs. And when we went to go pull the cable, the tensions were getting too high, and we weren't confident that we were going to be able to make those runs. Rather than pull the cable and risk damaging it, and then having to replace, a lot of sections of cable, we made the decision to go ahead and add a sectionalizing cabinet at a cost of $9,000, so we could split the difference of those runs. We did that. We were able to make the pulls very easily, so we felt good about that decision. Item 2 of that change order is additional chip seal on an access road on private property. For one of the easements that we received, we had proposed, and we had included in the easement, chip sealing a portion of the access road. Once we got through with construction activities, there was an additional section of the access road that ended up getting damaged. And it was an old road. The property owner has been very good to work with. And they have been just most generous and most accommodating with access on the site. They were concerned about the condition of the road, and so we discussed it with them and with the team and made the decision to go back and chip seal a larger section of that road, and they're satisfied with what we've done. The next items on that change order was a cost for crushing additional asphalt along 88 and a cost for the saw cutting of the extra deep asphalt along 88. During the design of the project, we went to Caltrans and we got information from Caltrans regarding the depth of asphalt, so that as we were preparing the bid documents, we could let the contractor know what he needed to anticipate as far as asphalt removal. Caltrans provided us information, and we relied on that information in the bid. And Caltrans had indicated the typical depth of asphalt along 88 is 8 to 12 inches. What we found is it ranged from 15 to 30 inches typically. So because the contractor had to deal with that, they had to not only saw cut the asphalt, they had to saw cut it in some areas 3 times because of the depth of the asphalt. Then they came back and said this is just taking too much time, and they actually brought in a rock saw, a Vermeer, and the last sections of 88, they actually just saw cut it with the Vermeer. And so what this change order is, in discussions with Q&D, they had accounted for a certain amount of saw cutting in their bid. The saw cutting that they had to do was far above what was anticipated. So we were able to negotiate with them that we would pay half of the rental cost of the use of the Vermeer on the project. And they absorbed half of the cost of the Vermeer and all the other saw cutting associated with work that they did last year and other saw cutting where they had to saw cut 3 times. So, and then once they got that asphalt out of the ground, we had to do something with it. Again, we anticipated a certain amount of asphalt. We ended up with literally, in excess of 3 times the amount of asphalt that we had anticipated. Trucking costs, we looked at 2 different options. We looked at off-hauling it and trucking it, just having Q&D do that. Or we looked at, is there the ability to put a crushing plant somewhere up here, crush the asphalt, and then the Forest Service had indicated that they had a need for crushing the asphalt when it was done. and so it wouldn't have to be off-hauled. And we found that the crushing was the least expensive option. And so again, in discussions with Q&D, what they have put forth is that if we would pay for 50% of that crushing operation, they paid for 50% of the crushing, all of the trucking, and the piles have been left. The Forest Service was very happy to be the recipient of those grindings, and with as much cooperation as we received from the Forest Service on this project, I was very happy that we could make them happy with that.
Are these the two big piles that we saw in the staging area just by the dam yesterday by chance?
Those are the Forest Service and Amador counties. The kind of the reddish material. The reddish stuff was from Amador, from Bear River Road, and the county early on had expressed an interest to want that material. It's kind of funny because the Forest Service owns underneath the road along Bear River Road, same as much of 88. So that material is not just Amador counties, it's the Forest Services as well. And so the Forest Service and Amador County have an agreement as far as the use of that material. And Amador County can only use that material on certain roads. They can't off-haul it to certain areas. But that was another thing that we were able to, instead of off-hauling that material, we were able to grind it and leave it in place and not have to pay for the trucking. So the final change order, item 5 that we have, is a change order from Resource Concepts. And you'll remember I came to the board back in July and I discussed where we were as far as construction inspection and where we projected to be at the project end. We had several things happen over the course of the project. Our inspections ran late last year. We ran all the way into the first week in December, which was not anticipated. We had night work, night inspections that we had to do as a result of our work in Caltrans. We had additional inspections of portions of the overhead when they were flying in poles that was not anticipated. At that time, I had projected that we would be about $69,000 short on our budget. We had some additional survey work that we did at the request of the team. We had some revisions to some of the structure locations. Some of that we're going to be able to charge back to Wilson because they requested some additional survey. But some of it is stuff that we just needed to do as we moved forward and said, you know, this structure isn't going to work here. We need to move it to a different location. So we're at a point now where I'm able to capture all of the inspection costs, the actual costs, and the survey costs, and then project out the costs for the next 4 to 6 weeks of this project to get all of these closeout items done. And that amount comes to $59,050. So we're actually about $10,000 less than what I anticipated back in July. So with this, I'm happy to entertain any questions about any of these items.
Well, before I open up to the board, my reaction is that for the scale and scope of this project, those are not terrible outcomes. I mean, you know, you're talking about $332,000 when you net out the Wilson stuff, primarily for rock, $184,000 for the 22 miles of, and $59,000 for Q&D, and then $59,000 for RCI, for a larger scope than, you know, originally anticipated. So I'm not sitting here feeling bad about it. Any other comments? Or?
Well, is this the entire scope of change orders? Is that?
No, we've had some before now,
Yeah.
but this is from the major contractors.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost $1 million total. It's not trivial, but I appreciate your point about not being.
I get 575.
Well,
332 for Wilson, ignoring the thing that PG&E is going to replace us for. 59
that's
for,
okay. It's all out there. We don't have to.
so 575, not a million.
I'll review my math.
Thank you.
We still have a cost of dealing with the bollards, so how do we pay for that?
We put in some of the bollards already. It's being charged against the project through district staff.
Okay.
We
What else
put
do
in
we-
the major ones around the backup station service already.
What else do we, anticipate coming, I guess, is the obvious question. I mean, this is, you know, there are still some loose ends, and, you know,
Sure.
big loose ends are big loose ends. It's not clear to me what else is lurking out there.
No, that's a good question, and Michelle mentioned some of them, but just to, our risks are PG&E. PG&E has, you know, does estimates for us and then trues up every month. 4 months at the end of the project, they have to true up the final costs, and that is a risk, because we don't know exactly what they'll come back as our final cost will be. We have reconciliation with Q&D. We had overlay and paving and overlay, Silver Lake to the district. We put in an allocation of $273,000 into the Out Valley cost estimate, but we don't know exactly what that'll be. That could be a positive from the 273 or a negative, depending on how our negotiations go with that subject. We have ITCC costs. Right now we're looking at costs that were incurred in 2013 being at 34% because bonus depreciation was in effect, and 22% for work that was done in 2014. But depending on what Congress does, right now I think we're forecasting worst case scenario, but Congress could pass bonus depreciation before then, which would reduce our estimate of ITCC costs. And then we have some additional costs that we incurred with the exponential due to the T1 line and the changes that we incurred with the IA and things like that. So those would be the financial risks that I see going forward.
Peter, Bob, questions, comments?
No.
Anybody in the audience have any questions or comments?
So district staff has reviewed these change orders and recommends approval to the board.
And so you've been through all the math at the district level, and we can rely on you to go get the money that we can get, like from PG&E and Q&D if we can.
Yes, sir. And we also have a claim going against Caltrans for the French drain issue as well,
Right.
which has not been mentioned.
I had that on my list, and I missed it. Just went over it.
Nancy?
So it's not clear to me, so we call it the remaining expense forecast, or all those change orders are in that forecast. And so if I look at that, it says so far our savings is a little over $8 million. Is that correct?
So
No? Okay, so I'm not understanding that like that.
Right, so the Out Valley, the cost forecast that's before you shows a cost of $37,864, which includes all of the change orders that have been adjusted this point. So they do include, that estimate includes the $575 that we're asking for approval today.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess I'm hoping and encouraging Michael to bring it down through negotiations with Q&D on the overlay, as well as obviously we hope for the lower ITCC costs, but that's not something we can really affect. Well, I'll make a motion to approve these change orders.
I'll second that motion, recognizing that my math was in error earlier on, $576,000.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. So we're moving on to 8C, which is continued discussion and possible action regarding the current Out Valley cost estimates. So you're right on cue, Nancy. Here we go.
So we actually covered the two issues that I was going to bring up, and that is the cost estimate at this point is $37,864, and our remaining risk, as stated, is for the PG&E, the Q&D cost and overlay, the ITCC, and the EEC costs. So I feel that those are our remaining financial risks for the project.
Then do you want to continue B8?
Yes, sir.
Presented is a updated spreadsheet showing all of our restaurants to date. This is the A8 and the D8 combined. The final draw for the 8 million B8 loan was pulled on October 17th. And at the very bottom of the screen, I just want to point out that with all combined, our weighted average does begin with a 2.
Cool. What is it, 2.9?
2.999. But it is a 2.
991.
Thank you.
And for just an update on the powerhouse depreciation, that has been sent in to Russ, as the board is aware. And we have contacted Howard Barnes and Bob Benson of Russ to get their recommendation on how we proceed if we bother Russ. And Howard and Bob have let us know that they have been in contact with the key players. They do know the importance, but at this point, they think that we should sit on it until the end of November. If we don't hear anything by the end of November, then we will contact them to get an update. So by the next board meeting, we should have a better update.
Seems right to me.
So can I ask a question, just for clarification?
Sure.
So I know we want that to happen. So what are the benefits to that happening sooner versus later?
We'd like it sooner.
Right, but what's the benefit? What's the benefit? It's not clear to me.
A potential significant rate reduction.
Okay, thank you.
But I think it's a little complicated in that we don't know how much electricity we're going to sell this year. If it continues like this in the last 2 years, that's not an upside scenario. And then the second thing, obviously, is that we're going to see in a minute. We have between $2 and $4 million of debt that we need to repay for the next 30 years, starting in 2014, meaning half of it. And we'll see that. So we'll talk about that.
Okay.
So the next subject is our current negotiations with PG&E. The interconnection agreement, as you'll remember, that the interconnection agreement allows, the revision of the interconnection agreement allows for the 115 kV line to actually be owned by the district. That's the major change. PG&E would continue to own and operate the 12 kV. The district will need to comply with the transmission interconnection handbook. Time frame for compliance with the handbook is 4 years, and the district assumes liability of the operation of the 115 during the interim period and beyond. And after much delay, I'm happy to report that our president had actually signed the interconnection agreement, and just as importantly, PG&E did as well.
Agreed.
So we have a signed agreement and the TFA, and as Bob Epstein mentioned, we're going to run out of things to do. So the IA is signed. And that concludes my report on update of PG&E negotiation.
Any comments, questions from the board? From the audience? Are you going to show a slide somewhere on the impact of the revised? Yes, you are.
Yeah, that's under E as far as the compliance with the.
Okay. So that concludes 8C, Out Valley cost estimates. 8D is discussion and possible action related to the district's operations and maintenance of the Out Valley. So that's Michael and Dave Wrightley.
So when we did our test standardization of the KMPUD, we and had the power outage check the rotation and the synchronization. We also did a test to see if our load-dependent start-stop would actually work. And this is a feature that Power Secure put into the plant that would automatically turn generators on and off depending on the load. It never actually worked well for us at the Prime Power Plant because it wanted too much spinning reserve. We spent too much money on keeping so many generators on. And since we didn't have the confidence in the reliability, and we were up there all the time anyway, because if you remember back, we were thinking that the powerhouse would just run itself. Well, it never did. We always had to be up there manually. So we would manually turn on generators on and off. But we do have this feature called load dependent start stop. And what the hope was is that this program would actually turn on the entire powerhouse if we ever had an out valley outage, and then sync to the demand in the valley and have an instantaneous switch over to our powerhouse, which is our goal. So we did a test when we did the synchronization test and found that the load dependent start stop did not work. I think I wrote an email to that effect. And so we have we're working with Dave Riley for the first week of December to actually come out and reprogram the load dependent start stop to actually work the way it's intended to. At this point, if the lights go dark right now, we would have to manually turn over to the powerhouse. It's about the same time, except that you have to put in the human factor of, oh my gosh, the lights are out, run over and start up generators. There's a 3-minute delay for when it's, if there's a lightning strike or something that's a temporary fault, the protection skis waits for about 3 minutes before it tries to reclose. So we could have a momentary outage and then it come right back on because it was only a momentary fault. During that time, we would start up generators and get everything ready, and then if we needed to, and the power did not come back on, and it was an actual fault, we'd switch over to the powerhouse. Dave Riley will also be, and EEC will also be not only looking at the load dependent start stop, but also reprogramming it so that we would be able to load test the generators on a monthly basis with the invalid demand. So right now we can turn on the generators whenever we want, but we can't load test them because we don't have a load bank and we can't share that power with the out valley. With this new programming, we would actually be able to load test them on the demand from the in-valley. So Dave Riley's on the phone right now, and Dave, could you elaborate on load dependent start stop and generator load testing?
Yes, Michael, and good morning, everybody. You've got a series of generator controls that are typical for any powerhouse, and they are used to start generators, stop generators, to synchronize generators with each other, and they do other things like closing breakers and opening breakers as needed to accomplish the control scheme that you want. As Michael said, our test, which was a simple test, we had out valley on, and we set the control functions to automatically start, and we were going to just trip out valley at the end of our outage on Sunday, October 26th, but instead the load dependent start stop didn't work as planned and tried to synchronize the generator to the out valley. So Exponential has looked at the generator control drawings, looked at the generator control programming. These things are our small microcomputers with programming in them, and we're preparing to provide a proposal to the district for this generator load transfer that Michael just mentioned, the second part of the control upgrades. Now that we've learned that the load dependent start stop is not functioning, that's become our priority. I know it's a critical issue for the district when running on out valley during ski operations and other critical times. So we have put together a plan to make the changes in the generator controls to accomplish both things that Michael mentioned. First of all, load dependent start stop, so that in the event of a loss of out valley, the generator, the powerhouse will come on automatically. Second of all, to provide controlled synchronization by that district staff can take generators on and offline seamlessly without impacting the district's customers. As Michael said, we're looking at doing that in early December. We're going to be getting programming written this month, the latter part of November. We have two engineers that are former employees of Woodward Governor. Woodward Governor is the company that manufactures these controls. They're the worldwide leading governor controller company. And our two engineers will be very involved in writing this program because they're very familiar with exactly these type of controls. Because of the need to hurry up with this, Exponential has already arranged to receive technical assistance directly from Woodward. That make sure we have the programming ready by the end of November. In order to properly implement these changes, we need to be there in early December with district staff, update the controls, and then we need to do some testing. So I have let Michael know that we're going to need to have an outage to be able to completely functionally test both changes to the generator controls. We suggested that we do this at night. And of course, Exponential is going to be there. We will do it anytime, but we can do it late at night. That's something that the district's going to have to ponder and decide what's the best time to do it. But of course, we should have ski operations going in early December. Hopefully, you're going to get some snow. That's it in a nutshell, I would say. I'm able to answer any questions.
So this is Bob. So I just want to walk through a series of scenarios and see if I understand it. So the first one is an unanticipated outage of Out Valley. And our main delay there in restoring power is the fact that the generators are off. They have to warm up, come up to speed, and then take over power. And our only way to shorten, we're estimating that's less than 10 minutes, but 10 minutes is a long time if you're on chair 4. And the only way to shorten that time would be to decide to run the generators in standby mode just to reduce the 10-minute time frame. So is that a correct understanding of?
I think 10 minutes is a long, once load dependent start stop goes on, we're set with 3 minutes. I think we could get that. The CAT generators, depending on the load, if the CATs could take them, they almost instantaneously, they have heaters on them, block heaters, so they warm up extremely quickly. So I think we can get that 10 minutes down. I know it sounds little, but we could get it down to the 5 to 8 minute range, which is a long time on a chairlift,
Right.
but I think acceptable.
So I think we should have a procedure, whatever, that's saying what our intentions are and timeframes for doing this. 10 minutes is long. And I don't know, I can't say that it's worth the fuel costs to make it shorter without knowing the frequency. So that's the first question. The second question is, once Out Valley is restored, what's our ability to turn off the generators and switch back without any disruption? Because
Yeah, Dave, I could.
I can answer that one.
Yeah, please.
That's exactly what our goal is in the ability to synchronize generators and bring them on and offline. That ability, which would be used by the district staff to exercise the generators, is the same capabilities the district staff would use to restore Out Valley. And after an Out Valley outage and generation comes on, then with this new capability, you'll be able to seamlessly switch back to Out Valley, be no outage to your customers.
Okay. So then, yeah, go ahead.
Just one more thing I'd like to elaborate on, Bob. This 3-minute timer that we're talking about, there is a particular condition, as Michael said, of a transient fault that can occur on the PG&E system that will not trip Out Valley off. What it will do is the PG&E system will trip off, and that's the condition in which we wait for the 3 minutes. However, if any other problem occurs in the Out Valley, say, for example, a problem in our transformer at green or on our 35 kV line or in our transformer at blue, we will not be waiting 3 minutes. Our control team will actually open the breaker for the Out Valley power at the powerhouse and start the load dependent start-stop instantly. In other words, there will not be a 3-minute delay in that case. It will be 1 second, the power will be out, and the generators will be starting.
Okay. So my next question is our monthly testing of generators and load. It's our intention of doing that with no visible disruption to customers. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
We have reviewed the drawings and know that we can synchronize, and the controls are available to allow this synchronization, so the district staff will have a series of control functions where they can go on and offline, but without taking an outage. A short-term parallel between Out Valley and the generators will occur that is acceptable and part of the PG&E Transmission Interconnection Handbook.
Okay. And then my last comment in terms of a good time to do a planned outage is I don't know how many other people have it, but my smoke alarms warn me when the power's out. So if you do it if you decide that 2 a.m. is a convenient time, I don't know how many people will wake up and thank you. And I don't know how many smoke alarms work that way, and I don't know why they work that way since there's a battery backup. But I'm not convinced that middle of the night is an optimal test time.
Mine don't work that way. You might want to check your batteries.
I replaced them all. Yeah. I took the battery. Yeah. So anyway,
I do think that what Bob suggested early on might be worth doing. I would ask you to consider it, which is to maybe write up the major scenarios that we would expect, and what we'd expect in terms of action and time frame, just so everybody's on the same page. And we might want to publish it on the website, or at least make Vail aware of it.
So I've had extensive meetings with Vail with regards to these scenarios, of course, leading up into the winter.
Right.
I haven't, we've talked about load dependent start-stop and what we're planning on doing it. So Casey and I have weekly meetings with regards to this subject, but we can write them down and get the general idea out to the public so they know what to expect.
Well, not only the public, but the board. And we could do it, like Dave just said, hey, in the event of a transient fault that is a PG&E system problem, there is a 3-minute, but if it's on our side, there's not going to be, just so everybody's on the same page. And as we operate the plant, learn to operate the plant, we compare that against our policy expectations.
I just think we should, just like we publish water quality on an annual basis, we should publish electricity reliability on an annual basis. And, the precedent that was established last year is there was 0 unplanned outages during ski lift operations. I mean, that's a standard that I worry about whether we can achieve that this year because we have less under our control.
Oh, I'm highly confident we're going to achieve it.
What?
I'm highly confident we're going to achieve it.
Well, okay, then
Great.
I rescind my lack of.
No.
Well, just like we found out this last week, there are certain situations we can't control. And I'd rather exceed expectations than disappoint.
Can I ask a question of Michael? In your discussions with Casey for the other Vail representatives, does he say after a certain length of time, they do have to start, evacuating those lifts? I mean, is 10 minutes a reasonable amount of time, or can somebody sit there for longer?
Yeah, we've discussed that. I don't have a specific time frame, but there would be a certain time with communications, and we've also discussed what are communications between the resort and the powerhouses, and who's going to call who, and we can't give them the responses. When's the power going to come back on? It would be sooner if you stop talking to me. So we have people that will be communicating with the resort, but at a certain time they will have to turn on they have diesel operated generators, which actually will allow them to deload the chairs. But I think 10 minutes, I know I've been stuck on a chair for quite a few times for 10 minutes. I think that's within their realm of just waiting and letting it, and then as we turn on power back up, we do it gradually, and they actually call for clearances. So this is something that Director Dornberg talked about at one point, is that the need to gradually bring back the power on so you're not in-rushing as much. So they'll call for a clearance. So we've talked to Dale about, well, what do we do now that we have the South Valley? Do we change anything? And at the beginning, we're not changing anything. When they turn on snowmaking, they call for a clearance. When they turn on the lift, they call for a clearance. When we get getting the reliability, then maybe we'll start backing off and not having people at the powerhouse during lift operations. But at the beginning, we're going to be extremely careful.
Thank you.
So that's 8D 1 and 2. Is there anything else on those, or from the board or the audience?
Is this a project that we're starting to do that's going to involve additional costs, or is this remedial, not something that should have been working anyway, it just isn't?
No, we had this on the agenda a couple of times, you'll remember, in the past. I think it was on the August agenda, and that is consideration of a proposal from Exponential to sync the powerhouse with the Out Valley project. I think you might remember that.
Okay.
So,
Remind me of the scope of the project, money-wise?
yeah, it's currently I have a scope of somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 to complete this work. I've authorized the beginning startup because management feels that this is a immediate issue that we need to resolve. Once we get that proposal, I'll certainly be bringing it before operations and then the full board for final approval. But I have authorized exponentially to begin work on this because of the critical nature of this work.
Did we buy a load dependent start-stop system from Power Secure that did not work, such that we should be seeking
Well, actually, it worked great with the powerhouse. It doesn't work with the Out Valley,
Okay.
so we have to reprogram it because the source of the power is different. The problem is that when we turned it on, when we turned the power off, the generators immediately wanted to start generating power and didn't recognize the power was already being generated by the Out Valley.
Okay, so it works.
It just needs to be resynced, reprogrammed.
We want to move on to 8D, which is training.
Yeah, I'll do, I'm going to take road identification and maintenance first. The district has acquired 3 sections of road for maintenance. 2 of these sections are guarded by gates. This is part of our long-term special use permit with the Forest Service. This one is beneath the 34 kV line, the overhead line. As you look from KM Green up the hill, you'll see to the right-hand side that there's a long road there. We share that with PG&E. When I say maintenance of the road, that would be maintaining the water bars, keeping the vegetation back. If it gets washed out, then we have to actually hire a contractor to get that in. But we share that with PG&E, so I feel pretty good. The other ones are to access sectionalizing cabinets along the underground line. And one of those sections is located under the 34K, it's approximately a third of a mile, and you can see it here. What's it close to?
The line shack at the top.
Yeah, that's at the line shack to the top. The next one here is about 0.65 miles, and that's near the Devil's Garden. And you can see an actual gate on the left-hand side as you go up. That's one of the, and then the last one is right near Silver Lake. As you come down off of Tragedy Springs, there's a road off to the left. And Michelle and I were driving on that road, and we found a tree that had crossed the road. So it's actually something that we're going to have to maintain and keep an eye out to access our sectionalizing cabinets. So I think RCI did a nice job in pinpointing these on a map for us so we can see actually where they're at. And we have keys to the Forest Service gates, we have keys to our own gates, and this is a portion that we'll be inspecting on a regular basis.
How often?
Good point. I'm going to address that in my next conversation, but the Dave Riley, our engineer, states that we have to check the substations on a monthly basis, and that we should check the overhead and the underground each spring and each fall. But I'm like a new parent. I think we'll be out there a ton more than that until we get to a point where we just, we never see anything and it doesn't seem to be worthwhile. But we're starting monthly checks at this point. In fact, on November 17th, we begin our end-to-end testing, end-to-end inspection of the entire line, and we'll continue that. And we'll continue it in the winter with various methods. We just need to learn at this point. We also have contacted USA North for underground service locates, so that when Caltrans pound snow stakes in Highway 88, or other people want to do digs along our line, that we're notified and we can go ahead and do markouts. So along the route, as you're driving up and down, you may see our red marks in in the dirt near our vaults or near our sectionalizing cabinets, that's because they actually did a call out for, pounding in snow stakes, and we ran out there and marked our lines. Even though they say that their sectionalizing cabinets only go down, their poles only go down 2 feet, and we're below that. If you've ever seen their equipment, it's scary. So we want to be out there marking our lines, make sure that they know where we're at, because it's not a definite science. So we are in the system, and hopefully anytime anyone calls in a USA Dig along our entire route, we'll be notified to do a mark out, which I think is really good. In your packet on page 61, it shows evidence of coverage of the insurable portions of the Out Valley system. And the above-ground infrastructures like the sectionalizing cabinets, the substations, these are covered by our insurance carrier. We actually have evidence of insurance now, so that's a good thing. Last meeting, questions of the district liability for the Out Valley project came up, and Dick Shanahan, I think, wrote a very comprehensive memo on page 73 of your packet addressing this issue of liability. And I won't read it, but I think that it actually talks mainly about the district's due diligence and care in establishing a viable inspection program and keeping documentation of that inspection program. It doesn't matter if you go in there and inspect it every day. If you don't write it down and say that you inspected it and followed up on the issues that you found, then your inspection program means nothing. So I think this was I appreciate the question that came from the board. I appreciate the response from Dick Shanahan, because it really cemented home the need for a good training and maintenance inspection program. And to that end, I've asked Brandy Fishner to come in and explain our current efforts to the code.
Morning.
Morning.
So we have been doing quite a bit of training over the last few weeks. We did training with Dave Wrightley when he was here on the 30th and 31st of last month. And we started with just general safety, who is qualified personnel, and the overview of the equipment. Our staff went with him to both KM Green and KM Blue, and we were provided with specific hazards of the equipment there at those substations. We were also trained in equipment use, relay operation, and fault determination. We went through scenarios of what to do in the case of an Out Valley outage. And we also learned about remote viewing of the relays. At KM Blue, at the powerhouse, we have a laptop that is connected to each of the relays, both at Blue and Green substations. So we can read those, we can operate breakers, we can see alarms, and we can get information off of the ISO meter. We've also implemented an in-house training. We will be doing that on a weekly basis, and our first training was actually on Wednesday, which was perfect timing because we went through the startup of the powerhouse on generators, which came in handy on Thursday. In your packet, you will also see the communication protocol with PG&E. We've provided them with our list, and they provided us with their protocols, and it, as Michael reported, it did work very well during the outage. We had smooth communication with them, both for what happened in the outage and when we were ready to re-energize our system. As far as the checks on the Out Valley system, we have had training on what we're going to look for when we go out to the substations on a monthly basis, what we're going to look for when we walk the overhead line and the underground line. And we've actually adapted some forms from the RUS website. They have forms that they require to see for substation checks for overhead and underground equipment. So all of those are put into place. We're going to continue updating those as we go out and see which breakers we're going to be looking at, which numbers we're going to be taking. Staff will be filling out those forms, and then I will be compiling those into a record keeping, a permanent record that we keep for liability purposes. And as Michael said, we are getting ready to do our first check starting this month. If there are any
Do
questions.
you anticipate a mass of paper, or can this be like check boxes in a spreadsheet or something that, you're looking at 10 years of paper on a monthly basis?
It will probably, I'll probably have paper going out with staff to do the inspections, and then I'll import it into a computerized system, spreadsheets and work orders.
And you think that will satisfy proof if we are required to produce it?
Yeah, on pages 80 and 81 in your packet, you'll see the sheet that we're going to give the operators.
Right.
That's the daily sheet. They can get muddy and grungy. That'll go into a binder, and then it'll be recapped on a spreadsheet. So, evidence of inspection is just going to be vitally important. So, yeah, I do look at a lot of paper, and actually, the more paper, the more inspections at this point, the better, as far as I'm concerned. If we can find things, then that's just great.
Any question?
I have a question about Dick Shanahan's letter. In my mind, it addressed primarily, electrocution from the overhead lines. What about sexualizing cabinets and snowmobiles, hitting them and claiming they weren't properly marked, and a lock that doesn't lock and somebody opens it? Can you comment on the on-the-ground risks?
Sure, so that's exactly, and I think that this actually does cover it. It's just different types of maintenance, and you need to make sure that you have marked out your cabinets, due diligently, so that there are no snow poles, and we've gone above and beyond what industry standards are on marking out the sectionalizing cabinets. Not only do we have snow poles on either side, but when they're in areas where these Forest Service feels that there's snowmobile traffic, we actually put additional snow poles out. So I think it's a reason of care, which Dick addresses in this. And all of our sectionalizing cabinets are locked with master lock. So I think we've shown a reason of care, the standard, which is standard in the industry, and I think we've gone, which is important, I think we've gone above and beyond that reason of care.
So to follow up on Standish's question regarding the documentation, sometimes it's better to spend a little bit of money now versus a lot of money later. So is there any value to having district's council look at, after you've got maybe a couple months under your belt, and have a look and see what it is we're doing, and does he see any holes in the process, or have we done overkill? And then I have another question for Brandy.
Well, what do you think about the first one?
I think it's a good suggestion to suggest to Dick to see if he feels qualified to look at our maintenance records, to see if he thinks that that's something else that we could do is to ask a sister utility to actually look at our. They may be more. We have a relationship with South Tahoe PUD. We have a relationship with Liberty Energy that does a lot of this work. They may be more qualified to be able to look at our inspection record and say, geez, you guys are nuts, we don't do anything like that. Or even PG&E, we have a relationship with them on what they do with their overhead lines. They don't have any underground to do the same thing. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to have somebody take a look at this.
Just when we were down there yesterday at the Salt Springs Reservoir, our stuff looks a lot more secure than a lot of PG&E stuff in terms of locks and, frankly, maintenance. Now I recognize their system is a lot older, but that's just an observation. You had a second question?
Yeah, regarding the thing, and I'm curious how many staff were involved in learning about this. And then is there, I don't know what your internal protocols are, but, if you get to go down every time, you're fresh, you know how to do it. But then if, it's somebody else's turn and you have it rotated through, you may not be as up on stuff. So I'm just curious about that.
We have approximately 8 staff members who have gone through the original training. We have 2 of our people who work at the powerhouse who are qualified electrical personnel. So what we'll be doing is we'll be alternating through sending those folks down with the other staff who are doing training, so that we always have one person who is considered qualified, along with people who are in training to assist them and get the experience that we're looking for.
Okay. And those two key qualified people will never go on vacation at the same time.
We're not going on vacation at the same time.
Anything else on district's operation and maintenance of the Out Valley line?
I'd like to ask 2 questions. First one, you mentioned you have a laptop at the powerhouse with which you can see system status, alarms, relays, etc. Is that the only access point, or is that possible to get at remotely from any laptop around here? You tell them that in or something that allows you to get to it, or is that the sole point of control?
Dave might be better to answer this. At this point, I think it is an internal network available at the powerhouse. Is that correct, Dave?
That's correct. For security reasons, the Out Valley network is not connected to basically to the internet.
Okay, so that's good.
Dedicated
I understand that.
local area network.
Yeah, that was part of the intent of the question, of course. So the security answer is good and understood why you want to do that. And then the question is, do you have backup on the laptop? That's the sole point of access. Okay. And let's see, there was another question. What's your protocol for turning power back onto the 34 kV line? If you have a break, you must have some sort of a command structure, and there's certain people that aren't authorized to make the decision to reactivate. Is that true? And who are those people? Is that all been thought through so you know who's got an ability to throw the switch? We think we've checked the line and there are no faults.
That's a really good question, and some of that still needs to be worked out. I think that the authority question, I think we still need to work on. Luckily, it was really easy because I was there and I made those calls on Thursday.
Right.
But of course, Brandy would be authorized to, and any management staff would be authorized to. But I don't think that's been clearly defined. That's a good point. That's a good point we need to work on. Because it's an important decision on closing a breaker on a direct fault.
Yeah.
I've been lectured by our electrical engineer on the importance of that decision. So.
And the importance of having somebody else throw the switch when you do it. Say, Peter, go over there and turn on that switch, just in case.
Thanks, Bob.
So the management is still standing. I got it. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Are we any closer to making a decision on what type of equipment we're going to need to either lease or purchase to access substation green during the winter months?
Yeah, actually, no, we haven't gotten any closer. Though it's a real concern after you walk the lines and
Sure.
everything. And once they close that road up, it's a long hike.
Right.
It's a long hike. So we have contacted Bear River. We can't get snowmobiles back there. I really kind of think a snowmobile might be the way to go, but whether we purchase one or rent one for the first season is still a question. But we will bring that up as a priority because I got it.
Okay.
It's a long ways back there. If they close spur 19, it's miles.
Right, and I think you need to know what the road, what route you're going to use to get the substation green when there is snow on the ground. Could you just go follow the line, the overhead line, because it's a clear area, or do you want to go up what is now the road, and which is going to look totally different with snow on it? So maybe if we're going to take that route, you might have to put markings in the trees, temporary markings.
We actually brought that up I think Cheryl brought that up. The nice thing about it is that I got a trail map from Bear River Resort, and Spur 19 is actually on the snowmobile route.
Okay,
So-
so did they groom that?
They groomed it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
That's really
crazy.
nice, yeah.
So it's not the time now that I'm worried about, and it's not the time when they've groomed it and it's 4 feet deep and it's great. It's the in-between.
In between, sure.
You know, when there's a little bit of snow, they've closed the road, and you end up not being able to snowmobile and having to walk back out there.
Then maybe a four-wheel drive ATV with chains or something.
Right.
Like the mule or they use on the mountain here.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I will prioritize that, Peter.
I just think that we should err on the side of more equipment rather than less for the first couple of years. Even, I know it's an expense, we're trying to save money, but getting in there in a timely manner is
Yeah.
pretty important.
No, I understand.
Okay.
Anything else in AP, Out Valley Operations and Maintenance?
Just briefly, I think I'd like to understand at some point, not now, but at some point, what the differential cost is of operating on the powerhouse versus reconnecting to South Valley Power, so that decisions like, do we or don't we buy a piece of equipment, it could be sort of framed in terms of what's the next best alternative. So, you know, the line goes down, do you have to go out and deal with it right away, or do you run on backup power for 2 weeks? If you did that, how much does it cost to run on backup power for 2 weeks? Does it make sense, kind of understand the comparative economics?
Well, most definitely, and it really depends on the issue. If we have a tree down, we're obligated by our Northern California Joint Pole Association to get our line off the 12 kV because it affects PG&E customers. So it's really the situation on what our deadlines are.
The short answer is it's 33 cents for diesel and it's 13 cents for Out Valley.
Per
Kilowatt
Per,
hour.
yeah, the incremental cost.
I'm trying to equate that to something like an hourly amount or something, I guess is kind of where I'm trying to.
Depends on the weather at the time.
Yeah.
So we'll conclude Out Valley Operations and Maintenance. And move on to AE. Thank you, Brandy. Which is discussion and possible action regarding the district's efforts to comply with PG&E's transmission interconnection handbook related to the interconnection agreement. Manager Sharp.
So the new point of demarcation is actually established, and two board members and Cheryl went down yesterday and actually looked at where our ownership is changed, and it's
It is one big freaking bowl.
it's just so big. And when standards comes back, we're thinking of doing another tour of actually going down there. I know that a lot of the board has been out there, but there might be interest in doing the tour in December, depending on weather, et cetera, of going down and taking a look. So we do open that up to the public as well, because it is, you know, at least going down to Salt Springs is quite interesting, and then if the weather allows, we could get over to the Green Substation, which is very interesting. But as you know, the PG&E has asked the district, and we are now contractually obligated to conform to the standards set forth in transmission handbook, which requires the owner of a transmission line to own their own automatic fault protection equipment, and that this equipment be located as close as possible to the point of demarcation. And now the point of demarcation is at Salt Springs. So one of several options for solutions is to install a switch station, a single breaker, a dual breaker of any solution at Salt Springs, and do something in that area. And as you can see, the time frame is 4 years. If everything went well and we had no resistance, I think that it could be done in a 2-year time frame, but we have a 2 to 4 year window. And this gives it no justice as far as the scope and the magnitude. I think Bob and Standish can say this is so much bigger than it looks in the pictures. But that's pole number 1 on the left there, and that's pole number 2 on the right. That's a 12 kV pole in the foreground, and that's a larger picture of pole number 1, and that's actually the point of demarcation. It's a triple pole, one going to Tiger Creek, one going to Salt Springs, and one going to KM Green. Each of those have manually operated, well, it's a visual disconnect of the 115 line. You can actually see it go, and there's another picture of it. This is a picture of number 2. The switch station could be between number 1 and number 2, or in the location of number 1. And this is kind of the site of the road that would have to be relocated in either of those scenarios. We've talked about the potential costs. It really kind of depends on which solution, how much PG&E costs are. And we've talked about our consequences of default, that the ownership, if we do not comply with the TIH in 4 years, the 115 actually reverts. The payment on the ITCC tax on the 115 is due and payable. Amounts to $1.5 million at 22% and $2.4 million at 34%. Cost of ownership's commenced immediately, estimated at $322,000. And this chart this was shown, I think, a couple of board meetings ago, but this kind of gives you a representation of what the current was before we signed the revised IA. So that was what it was going to be with them owning the 115. The revised is what we are today, and then if we comply, our cost of ownership will go down because we will not have the cost of ownership for the improvements that we've done at Tiger Creek or Salt Springs. Only the cost of ownership of the one pole at Salt Springs, if that remains in effect. The ITCC would be, I put question marks there because I don't know how much of those improvement costs we would be able to, they would be unneeded at that time. So would there be salvage value? I know that the soft costs we probably have to pay for, but the hard costs I'm not sure of.
So cost of ownership, I'm having trouble reading it from here, but is that $35,000 now?
That's $35,000 if we comply.
And what is the number to the left? That's the...
135. That's the revised, that's now. It's a little bit more than that. I think it's 12,000 times 12, it's 144.
Right, but the 322, is that the original deal we had, or is that the revised overhead cost with the original deal?
That's the revised overhead cost with the original deal.
Right.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. So the original deal was for them to own the 115, and with the increased cost of the overhead, it made the ITCC and the O&M increase dramatically because the cost of the overhead had doubled.
For some reason, I thought that was over $500,000 a year. Maybe I'm wrong.
So this chart shows the cost of the ownership as such. The first step is to write a request of change of the IA. It's shown on the Gantt chart that we've agreed to. We need to write a letter stating that we want to change the IA. And then this would constitute a formulation of a plan and to begin a system impact study. We have an initial meeting. We'd like to have an initial meeting in November in West Sac, and then on December 11th, possibly at Salt Springs with all players involved. So we are beginning to work with PG&E on this next phase of the project, and I open it up for any questions or comments.
The first meeting you anticipate when? November?
At the end of November.
Okay.
And that'd be in West Sacramento to meet the new team. We have a new team. There's Bob Daniels and Orby Davis, our project manager and overall manager, no longer will be with the project, and they have replaced them. So we'll go through the training process shortly.
Questions, comments from the board?
I guess the only thing, you have read the description of our responsibilities in the handbook. It seems like, there's a little bit of wiggle room in there. It says that the protection equipment will typically be right after the first poll, but, you know, it doesn't say absolutely unequivocally it has to be there. Seems like it's what was the possibility for a dialogue about where else that might be put that's satisfactory.
Any questions or comments from the audience?
So it's not, we're going to start this process now, and so there's some costs to the district. So how are those costs estimated to be, you know, do we know what those estimated costs are? Have you projected what they are? What kind of impact do they have on the budget for this year? Because I don't think it was anticipated when the budget was built last year. And so how are we paying for it?
Didn't you just cover it?
Yeah, it's
So it's
built
not-
into the next 4 years' budgets already.
Okay.
Using an estimate of about $2 million, and we've set aside cash rather than paying down debt. The cash over the next couple of years goes to cover this. So it's all, the unknown is the total cost, but we have an estimated budget to work with.
And we just don't know what the actual solution cost will be at the end point. And one of the variables is PG&E's, you know, study and what they come up with and what they'll look into. Stan, just while you were out of the room, I made a brief statement that we may want to organize a site tour before the next meeting. So we'll check on the weather, and I'll be putting out notifications before that. If that sounds like a good idea.
Sure, sounds good to me. You know, given the schedule for that Friday, you had proposed yesterday maybe doing it Friday morning. I just think that might be too much for you, because we've got the tour, and then we have the board meeting, and then we have the celebration. So my thoughts after sleeping on it last night would be to do it the Thursday before the Friday.
Makes a lot of sense.
Any further questions from either the board or audience on complying with the transmission interconnection handbook? I actually look at it as a positive. I think it's got the ability to reduce a lot of our O&M expense. And, you know, just looking at this green sheet that you sent us in, at least me, Michael, in August, and it had us up the cost of ownership charges of $42,000 per month. So that's a lot higher than that 322. And I'm hopeful that we can get the ITCC eliminated on the $2.5 million that PG&E has spent on their Tiger Creek and Salt Spring, pardon my voice, substation equipment, switching equipment. And so 4% of that is, what, $1 million? No, it would be 33% of that. So that would be $800,000 at the 33% ITCC tax rate. And it would be, excuse me, about $500,000 at the lower rate. And Michael's pointed out that about half that $2.5 million is soft costs, and our ability to recoup ITCC on that is less. So it's a definite financial opportunity for us, for sure. With that, we'll move on to 8F before I lose my voice, which is discussion of possible action related to the district's electric power purchase relationship with Shell Energy and CalISO, including options for the balance of calendar 2014, including the consideration of a hedge purchase for the month of December 2014.
Thanks, Michelle.
Bye-bye, Michelle. Thank you very much.
And Dave, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep, everybody have a good day.
You too.
Hang on.
So the district has solidified a relationship with CalISO and has been very fortunate to work with Shell Energy on our power purchase arrangements. A lot of staff time has been devoted to securing and following the procedural requirements for this relationship with CalISO. It's much more detailed than I think any of us had ever anticipated. Helping in this effort has been a relationship with Shell Energy, who has helped guide us through the power purchase world The board has approved a 3-year hedge at 80%, a peak load at 5250 a megawatt hour, and 50% of non-peak load at 4550 per megawatt hour. The October day-ahead market, and if there's any questions, I'll go into this in detail, but the October day-ahead market was $46.44 on a weighted average. The cost, we did not hedge November and December because for some reason we had questions on whether we would come in on time. Of course. We did come in on time, and we are currently paying the day-ahead market on our power need. We can hedge December. Currently, the cost for December hedge is very reasonable. It's $42.90 a megawatt hour, which is less than the day-ahead market was in October, and it's less than our hedge over the next 3 years. So there's a potential savings there of about $2,700, which makes sense to hedge once it snows, because it is based on your kilowatt hours. You're hedging this much for it. So it's not a decision that we should make today. It's a decision that we should be able to have the flexibility to make once it snows and have a. So I would like the board to consider the delegation of this authority to the board treasurer or the board president and the general manager on a regular basis, that if we need to adjust our hedge, buy a hedge, and potentially we have a dollar amount. I haven't thought that through as much, but as far as the December hedge, once it snows, it makes a ton of sense to hedge, and I would like the ability to be able to call up Bob or Stanton and say, hey, if it's snowing, we're open, we're going to use the kilowatts, should we hedge? And be able to have that authority. So I open that up to discussion.
Well, I have just 2 clarification questions. One is, if I read the board package correctly, Jill and you believe that, once it snows, December is kind of a no-brainer? I mean, we really ought to do it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the second is what are you proposing operationally that you and either the treasurer or the president, or you and both agree to do it?
And.
So all 3?
Yeah. Or just one board member would be.
Okay, so you and one board member, the staff and one board member.
Right. And for now, I would just say for December, I actually haven't thought through what a dollar amount and what the board might be, comfortable with as far as, because you don't want to change too much. But I think Shell is, for such a small account, they've given us a lot of attention. I think they've been, extremely good to work with. And they've actually mentioned that they can work on our future hedges with us as well, including renegotiating our current hedge, So I think we need that ability, and we may need that on a quick basis. But for now, I think December is fine until I get that thought out.
I guess my intuition would be that we ought to have this ultimately a general manager decision rather than a board or member or 2 board members being pulled into it, whether we think that's reasonable or not collectively. Just open for conversation.
Comments or questions?
Well, it's nice to have a board member involved just to protect, for Michael's protection.
Yeah,
I think.
this isn't going to happen more than once a month. I mean, this isn't a daily hedge.
Yeah.
And so the overhead of contacting one or the other of us is small.
Is it really a once-a-month decision, Michael?
Well, that's the maximum. Right.
Maximum.
I mean, we're hedged for most of 2015, aren't we?
We're hedged for the next 3 years.
Yeah, so.
Well, that takes care of that.
We're talking about December 2014. Any questions or comments from the audience? I'd support your recommendation, which is for December, you and either the treasurer or the president. Do we have a resolution for that, or just consensus? So,
A motion? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll second that motion you just made.
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we're moving on to G, discussion of possible action related to the district's current debt structure. Welcome.
Hi.
Jill?
With the Rust funds close to complete, I just wanted to bring up a summary of our district debt and a summary of our payments per fiscal year. So this one shows a summary of all of our debt. Missing from this one is our Bank of the West real estate loan. This will be updated. It's a $700,000 loan, 10-year term, and I believe 4.25%. So this just shows our interest rates, the loan terms, the principal and interest amounts, and our total debt. And then we have just a summary of all of our principal and interest payments, and this is actual payments by fiscal year. All the way down to the end of our Rust loan, which is 35 years. So this is something that we felt was important just for the board to be aware of, something that we'll continue to bring back, but it just gives an overview of our total payments per year.
And thank you. I mean, as background, I asked Jill or Michael to put this on the agenda just because I think, number one, we need to be cognizant of what our obligations are. And number two, I think we need, and I think we currently have, a financial plan where in a non-great year, we can still make our obligations, and in a better year, we can perhaps do something productive with the cash, like prepay some debt.
I think it should be noted that the Personnel Committee has reviewed in detail the CalPERS liability. That's actually two different sections, a side fund to that and the other. And that is our most expensive debt at this time. So if we get a huge snow year or something like that, the board may consider repayment of a portion of that.
What is the Bank of the West amount and what's the interest rate?
It's $700,000 and it's 4.25.
Thank you.
So in the audit, it says it's 604,703 principal. Bank of the
That's
West.
the balance at that time, I believe.
No, it's projected out through 2049.
I'm not sure where you're looking.
So I'm on page 125 of the board packet, and then it's a recap of the debt. And it looks like it's without the AA loan, which we didn't have at the time. And I guess the cap loan is really not a loan, it's a lease. And the CalPERS liability is someplace else. But the Bank of the West, it shows in there that the principal is 604,703. So is the 700, does that include the interest then?
No, it was originally $700,000. We made payments.
It was in 2012 that we started that.
Okay, so it's 604 now.
So 2020 looks like a fairly heavy year relative to the other ones, right? Sort of peaks there. Any special actions we should be doing to be prepared to pay what's obviously a pretty high portion of our total projected income for a year like that?
So the reason for that is probably
It's the shorter terms coming
shorter terms
due.
coming due at that point.
This is lumpy, but our cash accumulation is even. And if the cash was ever short because of bad revenue, we would then roll the loans over. So this is designed to, assuming good revenue, to minimize rates. And if the revenues are off, then we would end up borrowing more to cover it, but we would never have a cash shortfall.
Anything else on current debt structure, either from the board or the audience? Well, we move on to 8H, which is discussion and and possible approval of the report of independent auditors and financial statements with supplemental information.
In your board packet is a draft of the audited financial statements for fiscal year 13-14. And subsequently, we did receive a final version, which has been distributed electronically to the board members. This has gone through the Finance Committee on Tuesday. Olga from Moss Adams called in to discuss this. There haven't been any material changes between the draft that was presented and the final. It's just putting the final stamp on it. So it is staff's recommendation for the board to approve the report of independent auditors and the financial statements for the 13-14 fiscal year by motion.
I just want to ask a question there. I thought our procedure was that the Finance Committee approved the audit and then informed the board.
Based on what the charters of the committees would be, committees actually don't have the authority to formally approve a document. I think the board needs to approve it, an audit document.
We can recommend it.
Okay, I think we should discuss changing that in the future, because obviously for them to issue a final report, we have to first accept the draft, which is what we did in the Finance Committee. So if the Finance Committee doesn't have the authority to accept the draft, then I think we should correct that. Otherwise, we're adding a lot of delay in finishing the audit.
Did we accept the draft? Is that what we did?
Yeah,
Yes.
we
Okay,
accepted
it until we
finance.
finalize it.
Yeah.
And whether finance has the ability to accept it and the board confirms that acceptance at a board meeting, I can check with general counsel and see which way we should go with that.
Okay.
But all these committees were set up, whenever we set them up, with no authority. They were purely advisory, is what Michael's saying.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I'm just saying in this one case, we're adding a delay to the,
Yeah, I think we should have the ability of the Finance Committee to consider and accept it as we did. And
board can always overrule the judgment of the Finance Committee.
But historically, the board has accepted the final
Right.
financial statements.
Right.
Yeah, and I just think that that would be, even if both parties or both groups accept it, I think the board ultimately should accept it, just as you.
So we're voting to accept the,
The district wouldn't have received you would still be in draft form at this point, because the auditor couldn't have issued your final until you accepted it.
So the
that's
Finance
my point.
Committee accepted it on Tuesday.
Right,
And
and
they
that's why you
just-
got your final. Yeah.
And then we received the final now.
Right.
And you're asking for a motion to approve the final, right?
Or confirm the finance committee's.
yeah, I guess that's the way I would suggest it be worded.
Right.
So we confirm the Finance Committee's acceptance of the draft
Right.
and approve the final audit. Any controversy on that?
And that's without discussing the merit of what's in the report, just the procedure.
Do you want to discuss the merit of what's in there? Or what we did?
Well, I think we should comment on it whenever we're ready.
Why don't you comment on it?
So the audit, I mean, it is a clean audit. It's very thorough. I'm pleased, as I believe staff are, with the improvements offered by Moss Adams. There is an important, management letter that everyone should read, but the three major things identified, one was going back in the records and finding a land deal that was never properly recorded from the 90s. Then the way we actually handled the costs of the, not the CO, I guess the COP costs were incorrect, even though that was the advice of our previous auditors in blessed memory. And then the third were procedural things and suggested improvements they have in our processes. The most significant of which was just that, for a period of time, the rates were entered incorrectly. And so, all of those, I think, on the scale of the size of the operations, I think the audit report's a strong endorsement that, all the financials are properly represented and We have good procedures.
What happened to the point about the short-term coverage?
It turns out that once they looked at it more closely, they realized that it was a matter of we had the cash at hand and we were waiting for the invoices. So in their judgment, there was no net shortfall. So they've removed that. That's the major change between the first draft and the final draft.
So while we're pleased with Moss Adams, we have an expense issue that we'll have to come back before the board at a future meeting. Comments, questions?
That means they're more expensive than the previous auditor, or what does that mean?
It means that they sent us an email saying that they had substantial overages that they didn't talk about and would like our help. And so far, just Michael and Bob and I had a 1-hour telephone call yesterday. And it's something we're going to have to work through over the next couple of weeks. So I'll make that motion to confirm the Finance Committee's acceptance of the draft audited financials and to accept the final version.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Do you get to leave, Jill, or we have some more of you?
She's
You'll see
coming
me
back.
later.
She didn't get to go too far. Not like Michelle in person.
8I is discussion of possible action regarding the district's snow removal services operation, including a study of a valley-wide residential service. Michael.
So all association contracts for all homeowner associations in the valley have been received, and many of the driveways that were private contracts. We have a potential of $530,000 in revenues and expenses. Is exactly how that works once it snows and if it snows. As detailed in the memo in your packet, the district must take several steps and complete studies to move along on the idea of changing our homeowner association contract base to a property-related base. We have to do a service charge study, a rules resolution, a service area map, public hearings, then an extensive community outreach period, calling of an election, conducting an election, and implementing the new service in the spring. We have been making some strides in this behalf. We have completed taking the measurements of all the common area in the snow removal areas to place this into a data base tied to APN numbers to produce the service area map. With the help of Director Epstein, this data will be stored in the report server with changes made easily and tied into the building software. What this will enable us to do is to look at various scenarios quickly and easily and be able to show what those scenarios do to the overall rates. Of course, this will help to determine the rates schedule which is needed for the service charge study. Dick Shanahan has produced the rules resolution, and it is also in your packet. There is a couple of issues with the rules resolution that we were working with the General Counsel on. This will all be presented as we move along to the Planning and Finance Committees, and then to the board over the next several months for a potential public hearing in this winter. So that's kind of an update of where we stand. I am pleased that we've made some progress in this regard, especially with everything else going on. And yeah, we don't have a concept of the rates at this point. We're still in the data gathering, and this has been discussed with planning as well as finance.
Well, I don't have a great picture of how it would work, so I'll ask the question. Just to pick our homeowners association, for instance, and I know they're all different. The homeowners association has the obligation to provide snow removal service to driveways as a condition for approval of that development. Are you envisioning that obligation goes away and that there's a obligation from each homeowner for their driveway plus, you know, the proportionate share of the common area?
Well, in the CC&Rs of a homeowner association, they'd have an obligation. If that obligation is satisfied through the homeowner, then that obligation is actually in fact
Okay.
satisfied. So I think in fact it would be satisfied through this new arrangement.
Okay.
In East Meadows, I envision two different rates, possibly one for any unit and then one with driveways.
Okay. Sounds simple.
But there's just a whole bunch of details, and it's not simple at all, but
Right. Well,
we will
well.
get there.
Bob?
Well, let me just say, I think the opportunity for misinformation and anxiety with this project is extremely high. And,
Shaking.
what?
I'm shaking, you sense it.
And so I think I would advise that we do a communication that you know, when we put out the resolution, you know, it's a legal document that could be viewed as, you know, a power-hungry organization looking for the next thing to do, right? Or a community service that's going to lower everybody's costs. And it's a little bit up to us and how we communicate to do it. And I'm very concerned that the legal document can't be worded in a way that would describe the intention behind it. So I think we really need to think about how we communicate. So that's the first point. The second is we have to be able to demonstrate to every homeowner, this is your current costs, these will be your future costs. If they're the same, then what we're doing is we're sort of, you can still hire a private contractor, but you'll be paying double. If it's cheaper, then maybe some people will be happy. We know some won't be happy at all. And so how we communicate and how we demonstrate the data is really important. And if we get behind on this, then the folklore will take over. And ultimately this leads to every property will have one vote. Every property for which the fee would apply will have one vote. And that will be done by mail. But well before that vote happens, people need to understand the motivations. And ultimately this will come down to, are the economics better? But to me it seems ridiculous that every year we have to do several hundred contracts. By hand, the staff has to collect those. It's incredibly inefficient the way it's currently set up. But it does leave the option for private competition that presumably based on last year, you know, we've demonstrated that it's pretty hard for a private contractor to undercut us and stay in business.
I missed the point. You can have a private contractor, but it's twice the cost.
Well, if this is approved by the property owners, you could still hire a private contractor, but you're going to pay the fees anyway. So, well,
would still be billing you for.
we'll still be
service.
billing you. This is not an optional thing. You can't necessarily say, I'm going to use a private contractor instead of this. If this goes through and it's voted by the property owners, there will be a fee on your bill, and if you don't pay it, you know, there's a consequence. So we are effectively taking out any private contractor for the properties we decide to service.
But wouldn't we allow a homeowner to not have a driveway plowed if they chose not to have it plowed, period? And not bill them for the service that they elected not to take?
Yes. In KMA, there's people right now that don't choose to have a contractor do their, not very many, but there are people that choose to. So I would assume that it would work out that if you didn't want your district on your private property, you didn't have to have it. As far as the association property and what is considered, you know, public access property, that would definitely be included.
I see. Okay.
I guess my point earlier was I don't think our subdivision has the same luxury. You're a past president, right? I mean, didn't we?
I don't know that it ever came up, but your point was that you're required to have your driveway plowed?
Yeah.
If you have a built residence, not an unbuilt one, you're not plowed any
Right.
driveways on your unbuilt.
But whether it's our CC&Rs or conditions of approval, I think it was the conditions of approval.
Oh, yeah.
The
homeowners association had to have driveways plowed. So I don't think that we have the same out available.
Well, you could potentially work with East Meadows to change the CCNRs, or we could somehow accommodate the.
Yeah, I don't think they're in the CCNRs, I think they're in the conditions of approval.
So I didn't know we were considering opting out of a driveway, because I thought part of this is by knowing our total demand, we can have the appropriate equipment and things in place. So in fact, we don't know the total demand. People, you can opt, your driveway can be opted in or out.
I'm going to jump to a conclusion here that the number of people that would opt out on driveways has got to be insignificantly small compared to the overall demand for snow removal services. So while it's an imperfection in the forecasting system, it would seem like it's going to be fairly small, right?
Yeah, just to.
There's one driveway?
Yeah, there's one driveway currently that's not that, you know, and that's what, I think Bob's point
Is that you,
before is the communication part of this is that there's a lot of questions. People are looking for detailed answers, and we just don't have those answers at this point.
Well, we don't have the answers, but people have to guess our intentions. And that's
Also,
the part we
yeah,
have
I think
control
at
over.
present, we should advertise our intentions as, we're looking at this to see if we can deliver a net benefit to the community, and that should be demonstrable in terms of aggregate cost improvements, which would be based on using a supplier who is de facto a nonprofit provider, and that there would be additional efficiencies brought into the picture for that nonprofit provider because of, number one, more efficient billing, as you described earlier, and number two, better forecasting of future demand so that there will be a closer match between capacity and need. I think that's really the axis we ought to be on at this point. And then, of course, and maybe add to that communication, oh, and by the way, before this ever gets down to a by 8 p.m. vote, we will, of course, have to come forward and show everybody exactly what this means, not just in aggregate, but in their specific situation. We don't know that today, but we sure as heck have to show it to everybody before they are ever asked to vote.
And you think we can do that by April?
Well, he told me we could, so of course I believe that. But
Okay.
I
I think
think
it's pretty.
we're pretty sure we could do it by January.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing with the public and.
No, in terms of having the data.
The data, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the easy part.
Is it, just a second, Cheryl, but it
It's
is
good
it a
to
fair
know.
assumption that, if there's a fair assumption that we don't show most of the voters a cost improvement, it's gonna fail, so we have to show them the data and how it will be a cost improvement?
I would think so.
You got to be able to show every person exactly what this model would look like applied to their specific situation. And I think in the planning committee, we also recognize it's not just what does it look like on the first year. Somehow we have to describe to them what the pattern is going to look like going into future years, whether it has to be indexed to CPI or something, so that we have a way of telling them, we're not just going to, do this on day one and then, in 3 or 4 years, you're going to look back at it and think, what were we possibly signing up for this for because the costs have increased faster than we anticipated. That would not be a rational model, I don't think.
Sorry, Cheryl, cut you off.
I agree with Bob that the communication on this is really key. And I think the sooner that you can get something out that says that we're considering this or working on it, the sooner the better. And there's also, people do not know that Alpine Smith is not in the valley anymore. So that sort of needs to be sort of folded into, why this is a good time to consider this. And there's so many efficiencies with only having one snow remover person, especially in the core area, the village core, because there's so many intersections which, somebody has to keep coming back, day after day or hour after hour to see, did that guy do it yet? Or, can I do this stuff? I mean, there are really a lot of obvious efficiencies in addition to the contract process and the billing. in my opinion. But I think getting something out, sooner rather than later, as to the process and how you're considering it, and, with some sort of timeline as to when you might have some data would be advantageous to quell the rumors, because Kirkwood, once, it just goes crazy, so let's get the facts out.
I mean, KMA has invited Michael to its December meeting, and so, we have high expectations that we're going to see something, so that we can, have discussions with our members.
So you can what?
Excuse me?
Have discussions with our members.
Discussions with
I
members,
didn't hear
and
you.
so that, that, I think the idea is great, but the devil is in the details, and without those details, yeah, you just sit there and wonder, what does this mean? What does this mean? Is it this? Is it this? So, yeah, and I guess I would encourage you, although, it is an aggressive timeline, that if it seems like this is not the year, then let it go another year. Because you'll get more buy-in, yeah.
Any further comments? Makes sense to me.
I do appreciate Bob's earlier point about, the people in the valley might have a pretty strong reaction to this. And I say this only because I've discussed it with several people, and I think every one of them had a strong reaction to it, and it was not typically a very positive one. So I really do appreciate that this is something that has to be explained carefully and completely in order to demonstrate our sincerity and the substance of our proposals.
Yeah, and the service this year is key. Not that you guys don't always provide good service, but, if there are issues, an explanation of what caused them, that needs to be communicated so that so everybody gets the impression that you're managing this, which you are, so, don't take that the wrong way, please.
So maybe there's a reason in and of itself to delay, since this is the first year you have 100% participation. I mean, you've got some people that,
She was shaking her head.
I mean, it just,
There's no time-saving benefit of delaying it. We can either figure this out or we can't. I'd be surprised if there's a material savings. I think there's an improvement in quality and no cost increase, I think is more likely where we'll end up. But if we know how much removal we have, we can buy equipment that's scaled to that.
Right.
Whereas if every year we don't know what it is,
right.
we have to intentionally underinvest as a hedge.
Well, I'd love to see the numbers as soon as they're available.
Okay.
So unless there's anything else on snow removal, which it sounds like there is, keep going. Talk about walking into an emotional ambush. I think this may be exactly that.
It's hot on the trail of the valley trails, right? Where it wasn't clear why were we involved and were we planning on taking it over or whatever, and so we're filling a void of leadership. And for some people criticized us for stepping in.
I think you have to realize you're asking people to vote to assess themselves. So there's a psychological,
Yeah, right.
That's the big barrier you have to overcome.
Yeah.
I understand from a business point
Yeah.
of view, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I look at it is, I used to serve on a school board, and you wanted to go out and you wanted to have a bond election because you knew what your long-term plan was. You wanted to build a school, you wanted to purchase land, whatever your thing was. Well, once you had it all together, you then went out for that whole year beforehand, and you did your outreach, and you kind of got a feel for what was going to happen. You knew you were going to come in at 70+% versus going, gosh, I hope we do, I hope we do. So I just think it's, time can be on your side.
Critical to get the data and make the case.
Right, exactly, yeah.
I guess the only thing I'd say is, as a customer, I like the district's, take away the board role, the district service, because, we started with KMR. And then we had had Gail Rise for about 10 years, and
We did.
what, we could bring him back.
We're not signing up on that.
Sorry?
We won't sign up for that.
Why don't we move on to 8J, which is update on project to pursue Caples Lake water rights with the State Water Board.
Well, as has been mentioned, we have put the team together, and we have started our conversation. We have looked at the water rights permitting and found that it could take 1.5 to 3 years, depending on the protests that we've received on this issue. Environmental, which could be done consecutively, was probably about 10 months or longer. And so right now, we have received the data on the snowmaking line from Vail, and it's up on the screen here. We've contracted with RCI to GPS all of the above ground infrastructure on the east side along the snowmaking line. In this way, we'll be able to overlay these improvements, the wastewater and the water improvements, onto a map with the snowmaking line to actually show where there could be conflicts of crossings. As I'm sure you're all aware, that the Department of Drinking Water has certain minimum requirements of separation between raw water lines and wastewater lines. I think they're 5 feet. And crossings for water and different wastewater, with water always on top of it for the separation. We've also asked Vail to provide us information on the existing system. What's the size of the pipe? How is it constructed? What's the size of the pumps? How many pumps are there? What are their flow rates? What are their usage patterns? All that needs to be put together so that we can put it into the project description, but even more importantly, have a meeting with the Department of Public Health Drinking Water Division to find out what their what the criteria is going to be. Do we have a feasible project? Do we, what sort of mitigation measures might maybe be that we could institute for any conflicts that we find in the field? What sort of treatment plant would they be looking at with water coming out of Caples Lake, going through the steel pipe, and then deposited into, at a location near well 2 or other locations? So we're kind of in the fact finding so that we can describe the project efficiently in the project document, and also make sure that we have a project as far as going through the Department of Health Services, who will actually be the people that are the main permitting source of this project. Not the only one, but one of the main ones. So that's our current activities. We still have a goal of going to the state water rights this winter with a application, and open it up for any questions.
Are there any comments you would like to make as head of the planning committee?
No, I think this is very much in the fact-finding stages, as Michael described. We have to understand, the particulars of the snowmaking line, and be able to make that part of the overall application. We didn't maybe understand that at the beginning, but we've quickly found out that we need to be able to talk in terms of how we use the water in enough detail to be able to make our case on wanting to have legal access to the water. So that's an important current focus step, and we're going to just get through that and know better whether or not we have enough facts to be able to put on the table for the request for the access to the water rights.
Any comments, questions from the board or the audience? We'll move on to manager's report. General manager's report and operations report. I think you're going to do both, right?
Yes, Rick's got the well-deserved day off. In your packet, you'll find the newsletter. I'm pleased to report that even though it's fall and the least amount of water, for some reason aquifer levels are up. So we're up to 138 feet, which is the highest they've done all year. So this is great news, but I have no idea why. So no credit there, just good news. Thank you, Peter, for your update on the Timber Creek Townhomes. We appreciate that, and good to see development happening. In your packet, you'll see a tree survey as part of being a steward of public lands in Kirkwood. We actually had a registered forester come through and do a tree survey and identify dead and dying and hazardous trees. We actually had a tree out here in front of the project that was dead and hazardous to the building. We had it removed. You'll see the debris out there in the parking lot a little bit. But, and so they've identified around 30 trees that are dead, dying, or hazardous. Whether we remove all those or not over the years, but we now have the proper document that we can go before TriTech and get the proper approvals to remove trees quickly, which is the way that happens. We just completed our first membrane cleaning, so we went through and cleaned our membranes, and they came out sparkling. Snow stakes are going up in the valley, and as was reported earlier, we have installed bollards around the KM Green. We will be installing some additional ones at KM Blue. So that basically is it for the GM operations report.
Electric and propane, Brandy?
I will start with the update, excuse me, on the generator repairs. We have completed all the Caterpillar and Volvo warranty repairs we were scheduled for this summer. We do have a follow-up issue with Power Secure on a recurring oil leak on number 4. And we also have a minor coolant leak on the radiator of number 4. So those are issues we're going to continue to look into. But all the generators are operable when we need to go over to generators for emergency backup. We are ready to do that. We are also continuing to work with Great Basin on the modifications to our permit, which is in your packet. Our current permit with the Great Basin Unified Air Pollution Control District specifies that we are a prime plant and all the things that go along with that. We are working with them to modify it so that we will be classified as a emergency backup plant. And originally we thought that we would be limited on non-emergency operating to 50 hours per generator. I received news on Friday that because of the extent of our emissions control system, we'll actually have 100 hours per generator per year, which gives us a little more leeway for things like routine maintenance or delays in switching back over if we do have to go to generator power. So we are happy with the way that's proceeding. And we are also getting ready to transition to reduced hours at the powerhouse. For the last week, even though we've been on the Out Valley line, we've continued to staff 24 hours a day with the 3 shifts. We're getting ready to reduce to a 6 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. schedule so that we will have more staff available in the day to do projects like the Out Valley inspections and our winter prep. We're planning on keeping those hours so that we catch all of the lift operations and clearances for early morning runs, for snow days, staying late enough to clear the mountain. And we will have an on-call, on-site person who will have the emergency electric and propane cell phone on them, as well as the mountain radio to give clearances for things like snowmaking in the event that happens. That is all I have for my update, unless there are any questions.
Questions for Brandy or Michael on the general managers for operations report?
I have one. It's not directly related to port, but in the emails that we occasionally get, the question was asked about the long-term use of the equipment and whether it's all necessary or whatever. And I wrote back my explanation. But one of the things that I kind of wonder about is if this really is backup, having 2 types of equipment with separate parts to maintain the rest of that is probably a higher if we think over the next 30 years, having both Volvo and CAT generators to maintain and test is probably more expensive than having only CATs. And since it's no longer material, the efficiency gain at low operations, since they'll probably rarely be used, is there any point in looking at if we, for example, and this may make no sense at all, but I thought it was appropriate to ask, if we sold all 5 Volvos, while they're still relatively new, and bought a CAT, would we, could we, from a capital viewpoint, break even on that, and would it lower our maintenance costs? And so I'm wondering whether that's anything worth thinking about, or if it's just a dumb idea.
I think it's something that we could definitely look at. We looked at similar CAT engines to the Volvo engines during our initial,
Right.
looking at the project. So I know there's CAT engines out there that could replace. I don't know if it'd be on the same footprint.
No, I would just get 4 identical CATs.
Yeah, and the problem there is the construction that it would take, because we have concrete mounts. that
Right,
these-
right, I understand, right.
So there would be the benefit to having all CATs, now that we've had a couple of years of experience, is that they start up very quickly. So in the case of an out valley, they don't take, the Volvos actually take almost 20 minutes to warm up. So it takes quite a bit of time to get those Volvos up and running, while the CATs are 5 minutes and they're warmed up and ready to go.
Right, and another option would be to upgrade one of the 1 megawatt CATs to a 2 and sell the Volvos.
Right. And how much redundancy does the board want? I mean, we've talked about, once the area grows up, do we expand the powerhouse to keep that 100% redundancy? That's a question that the board will have to wrestle with as we grow.
Right, but there's 2 ways to do that. One is to add generators, and the other would be to add storage.
Right.
Because we can, at a price, we can store the power we would need during lift operations to cover that, and then we could buy the power in the middle of the night at a lower price. So there's some trade-offs. So generation isn't the only answer to that. I'm kind of in favor of 100% redundancy, but I don't really want to tell the lifts you can't run in these situations. So anyway, that's my kind of open question.
Well, I'm in the same board with you on this. I think it's time to evaluate the Volvo experiment and see if we want to continue trying to nurse them along and look at options.
Yeah.
Let's see what it that.
Yes, I think we're in alignment on that.
So who would do that study?
Well, I would recommend that we use the people that have given us the best service, and that's Holta, California, our CAT dealers. They've been excellent for us, and they would be, I think, the right people to make an evaluation.
And what would you see as the priority and timing of this versus other projects and staff capability?
I would put it in the second tier.
Yeah.
Right.
So is it the consensus of the board that we want to direct staff to begin exploring this?
Well, I wanted to raise the question, and the other thing with regards to storage is over the next couple of years, the opportunity to get grants. The state has a specific objective of a certain amount of energy storage to be brought into the state. Right now, the IOUs carry that responsibility, but we could possibly get a significant amount of the costs for that covered. And we're in a perfect, ignoring the altitude and remoteness, we're in a perfect hedging place in terms of using storage, because we have a peak usage. We have a very predictable usage. It's peak. It's in the weird times of years. We can buy power when nobody, when there's surplus. So.
And what are current storage technologies? Is it capacitors or is it
Batteries.
flywheels?
They're
Batteries.
batteries, yeah. but there's a whole list of facilities that I haven't physically looked at, but talk with people that are in the 20 to 40 megawatt range, typically used to shore up wind power.
Well, why don't we
Randy needs a new piece of
direct
equipment.
staff to,
Yeah.
start looking into,
Also, once, can you phrase it broadly enough, it's the long-term plan for the powerhouse.
It's a
right?
long-term plan for backup. Yeah, what's the most cost-effective way of providing complete redundancy? And is it the current configuration, or are there changes that might result in high reliability and lower maintenance costs?
makes sense to me. Do you want to move on to administrative report?
Okay, we'll start with performance reporting. That was a supplemental to the packet. Production for October was down in all services. For electric, our metered was down 60,000 kilowatt hours from plan, and our unmetered percentage is still up. Brandy and I have discussed this issue quite a bit, and we're really hoping that with the Out Valley Online that number is going to drop dramatically starting in November. We've made plans that if we still see an increase, that we will do a manual electric and propane meter read. We used to do it all the time, so we know where to do it. If this number doesn't drop, just to make sure that our metering is correct, now that we don't physically look at the meters very often. Propane, our variance from plan, propane was down 41,000 cubic feet from plan. This also shows a 17% unmetered total for October. And we've looked at this quite a bit too. I don't believe that it's actually an issue with a loss. It's my opinion that we have some upgrades that we could do at our tanks. The way we currently meter how much propane is in the tank isn't very efficient. So we're looking at putting a master meter on the vaporizers, which would give us a more accurate idea of how much propane is in there. Another issue is that we receive propane in gallons and we sell it in cubic feet. And there's a lot of different things that go into that. When we read the tanks, if it's a different temperature, then propane can expand, or there's that, and also the altitude. So I think our first step is to look at replacing the meter at the vaporizer for propane.
But if that were the case, wouldn't you expect some consistency from month to month?
Well,
Well, it kind of depends, I mean, it's not like water, it's not like
Yeah,
electricity. It's
right.
like, if it's a certain degrees, then, you know, it's a 10% overage, and then you have an altitude factor in there. So I think there's a lot of things on reading the tanks that we're not scientific with, that we could get much more accurate with an actual meter at the vaporizer rather than trying to read the tank measurements. I think right now it's a guesstimate, and it tends to be all over the board as it's showing, rather than being consistent.
For water, our usage was down 265,000 gallons from plan. And our unmetered percentage is also up. I've been working with the supervisor over at the plant to try and understand kind of where his information is coming from too, to try and link that to what we're actually metering.
I have a lot of unmetered usage here. don't
So,
we?
Joe, I want to summarize what I just heard in these three things. We have mysteries and we can't explain them.
That's fair.
Okay.
With, I'm trying to make that a priority at this point.
Okay.
We have, working with electric and propane and water to try and solve some of these mysteries. It's been on our list for quite a while, but
Right.
it's time to bring it up to the top.
Okay, and my other question related to electric metering. So I was trying to figure out whether the snowmaking was running or not, and then it finally occurred to me that those meters aren't radio controlled; they're manually read. So the only thing I could do is see the pumping from Cable's Lake, and that's apparently not correlated with snowmaking. So is there a technical reason why we can't have all the meters be read hourly, or?
Part of it is a location issue. The Caples pump actually does have a remote meter, but it
Uh-huh.
doesn't pull because it's too far away.
Okay. But what about the lifts, for example?
It was more of a cost issue, I believe, at the time.
Well, not reading putting them on remote reads on the front side. Yeah, at the time, we just didn't, we didn't put those onto the system. But we can look at that cost and look at.
Well, it's just kind of interesting that, we know demand by line. So we have demand known by 3 lines. We have hourly detail on everything except on 95% of the meters and 60% of the load. I don't know if there'd be something to be gained by being able to have hourly charts of everything and being able to correlate that with things that are going on. So
Part of the problem is with census also. I'm sure it can be resolved, but any meters with multipliers that aren't just 1 cubic feet, census can't understand that. I don't know the best way to say that.
but they can do it with propane, and those aren't one. The multiplier there is 7,800.
That goes from census to PCS. It's not actually in census that it does that.
Oh, okay. But
We
so,
add the multiplier when it goes back into billing.
right, so we can do our own, we could do our own multipliers if we needed to. Okay.
Was it a matter of just getting 3 more wireless meters? Wireless meters?
We would be more than 3, but yeah, it would be however many lifts. I don't think they'd read from the backside, so there was.
Yeah, I pass on that.
2, 3, and 4 would be out of the loop, but the front side we could do. And we're still not done with the project as far as installing all the water meters.
Well, there's still 109 left.
Yeah, so there's still meters to be installed. And we want to do it on the absorption beds as well.
Why don't you continue?
Okay.
For September financials, I'll start with the balance sheet. The main thing that I'd like to bring up on the balance sheet is our operating cash. September balance is showing 1.7 million, which is showing 800,000 down from plan. There's 2 large reasons for this. One of them is a timing issue. There's about 500,000 of COP payments that were actually due in September that were budgeted for at the end of December. So that issue will correct itself. There's also a 438,000, I believe, rest capitalized interest. This is an issue that's going to continue. Previous auditors, how do I say this right? In the past, we were paying for any capitalized interest from the rest payment, from the rest loans out of the rest construction funds. From this audit, Moss Adams has directed us that it should come from the same funds that all interest is paid for, which is out of operating cash. So 438,000 has been moved out of operating back into the rest project fund. And that will continue to show down on the budget.
So that's 438,000 of operating cash that we spent because we didn't pull it from Russ.
Yeah. And for the income statement, September actually was a decent month for us. Our operating loss for September was 166,000, but it was 12,000 better than planned. Our year-to-date operating is 82,000 better than planned. Our net year-to-date is up 233,000 from plan, mainly due to interest expense. The way we were showing our interest expense wasn't being calculated correctly. That was also a correction that Moss Adams found. We should have been actually capitalizing more than we did, which is a $134,000 difference. And as the budget shows, property taxes are 100% being allocated to electric for this calendar year. And we did finish the electric Form 7 through September for the calendar year 2014. And at the end of September, our tier ratio is at a 1.3. And our obligation is for a 1.05. The main reason for that is the interest expense that we're capitalizing more of. Through September, all of our departments are meeting plan. The only one that's down by just a little bit is wastewater. In operating, wastewater is down 4,400 from plan. There were some expenses, unexpected. We had to replace some VFDs, and there has been some well to pump replacement work. Are there any questions on that?
From the board or the audience?
I have a question on the delinquency report. It seems relevant. So the $51,000 in delinquency is represented by people that didn't pay in the net 30 days, but are pretty much going to pay in 60 days plus an interest plus a penalty.
Yes.
So since our cost of capital is low, we actually come out, we're fine financially on that. I mean, is that basically
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
This is, the beginning of the month, we just finished billing, so they always look a little bit worse than I think they actually are.
Right. Right. Okay.
Everyone on here, if they are past 30 days, they did get a penalty and interest charge.
Right.
But you can see that we have 2 accounts right now.
Yeah, that
that
a
are-
large percentage of it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Are they going to pay?
Well, they're homeowners associations. I think they're good for it.
The 2 that are locked off?
Oh, no, I thought you meant the ones that didn't pay in 30.
Yeah,
Meadows don't, right? You expect them to pay?
yeah, we've actually been working with them quite a bit on it. It's that goes back to an issue when we took over Mountain Utilities. There was some meter multiplier issues. This was a couple of years ago, and so we did an adjusted bill.
Right. And you expect to collect that then?
Yes.
Okay. How about this bar and grill?
We've actually made payments. I spoke with him on Friday. He'll be in on Monday.
And how does that work? He typically starts paying his bill when the season rolls around, so he can operate?
He asked for a payment plan, which if he does adhere to the payment plan, then we
Shut him off.
shut it down.
Anything else on administrative reports, such as cash waterfall?
Yeah, there is the cash waterfall. It's showing that as of October, our operating cash is at 1.742, and then there's just a projected cash going forward. It shows our low is in March of about 1.4 million, and it's down quite a bit. That's also due to timing for the COP.
that was budgeted to be paid in June. We're actually 3 months off from budget. We pay in September and March, and we were budgeted in December and June. So March was a hard hit because we paid our first RUS principal payment, and we also have our COP payment.
Do you anticipate any issues there in terms of, I mean, the way it's worked the last couple of years is our low point was December, and then we start collecting revenue from ski resort operations and build cash through June when the summer's setting. This is kind of showing the low, you know, being right squarely in the middle of the season. This is kind of related to the debt service topic, so we have to get that right in a down year. Okay.
So
Any other
how does that happen?
budgeting, or if we miss it, I guess what Bob was saying is we can roll over the debt for us. But I think it's primarily through budgeting and electricity rate setting when we get the depreciation ruling.
Okay.
So they're all pretty related.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Committee reports, communications?
We haven't met since the last board meeting, but I think the main two topics are how to improve the effectiveness of the board audio for remote access, which is an open project. And then secondly, I think communications on snow removal probably should be prioritized.
No, I don't know.
Anyone else think so? I guess there is one other thing that came up. Right now, we do not actually, our rates are a matter of public record. They're in the documents when we approve them, but they don't appear in the bills or on the website. And that's the other thing I think we want to look at is having those more visible.
Our rates appear on the website?
What?
Our rates appear on the website.
As a, okay. I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Where do you find them? Where do you find them? Customer service.
And, you know, the difference between wastewater, or excuse me, irrigation water and regular water, one has a CPI and the other doesn't.
That is correct.
Did
So
you go back to Jim Manos with that?
Yes.
Was that just an oversight on our part?
Yeah, when we approved the water rate increase, we didn't include all water. We didn't include the irrigation and construction rates, which are separate and apart from the water consumption. in
Okay,
the
and that's the one
CPI.
that does not have the CPI, right?
Water and construction both are set rates that do not have CPI increases.
Should we adjust that in the future?
I think that would be a cleanup issue that we could do with the next rate. With the next rate setting, we could actually increase, add a CPI increase in there.
Okay. Planning?
Yeah, things we haven't touched on so far, the meadow trail system, Cheryl and I went out and did a walk of the meadow, tried to come up with a more complete map of our thinking, and we're going to take that, put it onto a larger format map that we can then use to socialize the concept with HOAs, and Dave and Peter as well are actively asking to take the proposal and overlay it onto the winter cross-country ski grooming map, and then try to kind of work through with Vail what they might be willing to do as part of a proposal, if anything. Not clear at this point. Second action on meadow trail system is that PUD, Michael and staff are going to come up with a plan to do some additional Forest Service grade trail work and access things on our own property, and that would of course come forward to the board before any action would be appropriate. We had a request from a community member, Carolyn Scott, to look at the possibility of having a greenhouse used by employees to grow vegetables, and Michael's informal poll of employees seems to indicate that there's not a lot of momentum behind that, so I think we're gonna slow roll, if anything, on that project. And just since it came up in the planning committee, there was some discussion about the large pile of materials, construction stuff that happened behind the new area that you're putting up buildings on, and what your plan is for that. There's a lot of rocks and dirt, and I don't know what all up there.
Probably the majority of that is going to go into the backfilling of the foundation, and then what's excess will create a very small berm in front of the unit in the parking area, and the rest will go up into the kind of the rock dirt storage area up in Martin Point area.
Locals call that the stump dump.
Stump dump?
Yeah. Because that's where we used to burn all our stumps in the old days.
Right.
Way old days.
Way old days. Good old.
And other things. I won't go into evidence.
Please. Is it Finance Committee?
Just a couple of things to report that haven't been covered. One is that based on the hearing we had last month, we decided that net metering would now be an estimate for the year and then the final. And so so previous net metering refund rate, if you produced more than you used, was 33 cents. And so the estimate for this year will be 13 cents. And that's based on, we have 4 months of diesel and 8 months of that, and we won't know the final until we know the actual usage in each of those. So the new estimate would be 13 cents. And then in the following year, it would be lower, since we would have relatively no diesel going on. The other thing that we'll follow up on here going forward were the recommendations in the audit, and looking at places where we can make the procedures tighter as appropriate. And then we have the ongoing look at the capital connection fees for electricity that we'll be exploring further.
Operations Capital?
We were scheduled to meet on Thursday, and we canceled that.
Canceled for you.
Yes.
Personnel, we had a meeting recently on October 17th. The sole topic was fire department staffing on call policy. Michael reiterated his prior recommendation, and Eric and I felt compelled to support staff's recommendation. General discussion, opportunity for board members to ask questions for clarification, provide information to staff, committee updates, request staff to report back on a matter, or to direct staff to place the matter on a subsequent agenda. I guess go ahead, Michael.
So as soon as you hit the gavel, I'm on vacation for a week. So
I have a question about that. Go ahead.
So for anyone that's needing to contact the district, our capable staff this year, Jill will be more than adequate to answer any questions or take on anything. So, but just for the board's aware.
Peter, do we need like a public hearing or an ordinance or a resolution to approve his vacation?
Or a state of non-emergency.
Okay.
So can I ask a question? So Michael, are you going to shut off your phone? Are you going to really take a vacation?
I will have email access. So.
Okay.
He has the new iPhone 6 Plus.
Oh, okay.
It's huge.
The phablet?
It's huge.
It is actually gorgeous.
Actually, just thinking back about our prior discussion, I think the way Bob put it, which is the long-term configuration of the powerhouse, is the right way to phrase it. When you write up the minutes and, start working on it. So I guess we'll go into a closed session and then come back and adjourn it. Is that what we do?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Big snow.
So do you actually think you're going to take action in that closed session?
I'm not going to recommend the board take action, but it's up to them.
Because it's my understanding that I don't think you can take